Lompoc City Council for February 19th will reconvene from closed session. Do we have any reportable action from closed session?
Thank you, Mayor. The City Council met in closed session to discuss the two items on the agenda, one item of existing litigation and one item of anticipated litigation. The City Council discussed those two items, but no reportable action was taken.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Mosby?
Present.
Councilmember Cordova?
Present.
Councilmember Vega?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Dirk Starbuck?
Present.
Mayor Janelle Osborne?
Here. Please join me as Pastor Bernie provides our invocation and remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Let us pray. Dear God, thank you for this night, and I pray for the success and blessing of love and light and life upon our mayor, our council members, our police and our fire department members, and all that you have placed in places of responsibility in our city, for our schools and for those in our community who endeavor to do good and add value to the lives of others. Our city is faced with many challenges, but this is not our first time in the history of Lompoc. And there are certainly no situations in which, if we listen to you and the wisdom of one another, that we cannot solve. Give us hearts of compassion and a longing to work together for the common good. Be with those who are hurting and need more than a prayer in their time of need, but assistance and a hand up rather than a push out. Help us to act with character and conviction. Help us to listen with understanding and goodwill. Help us to speak with charity and restraint. Give us a spirit of service. And remind our leaders that you have provided them with their place of influence so they might steward that place well. Guide us to become the answers to the prayers we pray, and help us to lean into the solutions and not add to the problems. Help us to see the humanity and dignity of those who disagree with us, and to treat all persons, no matter how weak or poor, with the reverence your creation deserves. For all of us matter to you. We ask these things confident in your goodness and your love. Amen.
I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
If I could have a representative from our fire department join me at the podium. Good. Thanks for coming.
Yes, ma'am.
So for those of you who are unaware, we have a sister city in Locarno, Switzerland. And it is our first sister city of the many that we are sisters with, and effective October 1973. And in the process of being a sister city and having goodwill across the world with our collaborative communities and getting to know each other, Locarno recognized and sought out the support that our fire department provided during the recent fires and sent us a plaque and a letter to which they would like us to award our fire department. And the letter says, "We are delighted to inform you that on our website we have included the town twinning between our cities held in 1972, which we consider very interesting and precious for the relations between our communities. On the KEYT website of November 29th, last year, we read that your firefighters helped to search the remains in Paradise Fire aftermath. With great apprehension and concern, we followed the developments of last year's campfires in California. As a sign of our sincere appreciation for the work of your local Lompoc firefighters, we are very pleased to send you herewith a crest of the Locarno City Fire Department with the following mention: to the firefighters of Lompoc from the firefighters of Locarno in honor of our sister cities. We kindly request that you hand this over to your fire chief and to Captain Scott Nunez as a symbol of gratitude for the important work and immense efforts on behalf of our fire department chief, Alain Zamboni, and from the municipality of your sister city, Locarno, with our very best regards, Mayor Alain Scherer, Nicolino Sovani, head of security, and Marco Gerosa, city manager. So, on behalf of our sister city, Lurcano, here is the crest, and thank you so much for your service.
Thank you, Mayor.
The next presentation on our agenda is for the biennial update report from the Chamber of Commerce and Visitors Bureau.
Good evening, Council. I'm Amber Wilson, President and CEO for the Lompoc Valley Chamber of Commerce and Visitors Bureau, and I am here this evening to present the biennial report for the period of July through December 2018. So we'll start off with some statistics. Number of walk-ins into the Visitors Bureau was 1548, which was up very significantly from the same reporting period the last year, 668 people. So we are getting a lot of visitors into the area. Number of calls remains consistent, and then you can see below the visitor and relocation packets that were distributed. We did have a significantly higher number of visitor packets that were mailed out as well. Some website analytics for you. So these are the countries that are looking into visiting our area. So if anyone's interested in doing some destination marketing, we might want to target these locations. So some interesting stats. These are the top 5 pages that are being viewed on our website. So a little bit different from 2017. Homepage, visit, about us, board of directors, and membership are the top in 2018 for this period. And then these are the top 5 downloads. So what people are actually downloading from the website. Our flower tour map consistently remains the most downloadable brochure on our website, followed by Heritage Walk, military discounts, wine trail map. And for the first time, our August Chamber Connection newsletter was in our top 5 downloadable publications at 319. We recently did a newsletter revamp, and so maybe that's why. So for social media, we've been consistently trying to ramp up our social media presence. So this will just kind of demonstrate how we're growing in those areas. We're really trying to utilize Instagram as well as Facebook as a way to reach out and engage the community. And then followed by some community events that were held in that period. Old Town Market was also in our last report because it intersects in both of the reports, but we wrapped up our 8 weeks of fun. We have about 100 vendor spaces throughout the market, and we sold out vendor spaces every night but 2 nights. And we received overwhelmingly positive feedback that this was the best year that we've had, and I think we're really just going in a positive direction. Each year it gets better and better, attendance increases. And so we're looking forward to another fun Old Town Market this year. We held our annual awards banquet and highlighted some awards recipients. So for Small Business Excellence, we awarded that to Scratch Kitchen, Woman of the Year, Ann McCarty, Man of the Year, Linnea White, and Volunteer of the Year, Sandy Skinner. We held these business connection luncheons. We met our new city manager, Mr. Troop. We did a State of the Lompoc City Parks led by Dirk Ishiwata, and we introduced the new class of our Youth Leadership Lompoc Valley in October. We held our annual Old Town Trick or Treat. We had almost 50 businesses participate in this, and if any of you have ever been to this event, it's mayhem. I've never seen so many kids in my entire life, and we spend an exorbitant amount of money on candy that we give out within a couple of hours. So it's a really great opportunity for folks to come out in a safe environment, have their kids trick or treat with the businesses, and have a really good time. We also held our annual Lompoc Valley Scarecrow Fest competition. We had 22 entries this year. These are the winners up in front. This is a economic development driver and a really fun community event as well. So we had 300 people vote online and in person. I will say we had to disqualify over 100 ballots because it was clearly ballot stuffing. But it's a great way to get into the festivity, have some fun, and then engage some folks into your business. We brought back the Holly Jolly Jubilee this year as well in December. That is a Santa-themed vendor event. The pictures are kind of hard to see, but this included crafts for kids, face painting, vendor booths. We did letters to Santa. Santa himself, of course, was present for the kids to take pictures with, and we did an ugly sweater competition. You will see I participated in that and did not win. We held our annual Small Business Saturday event on November 24th. We had an increase of business participations. We had 39 businesses this year, up from 29 last year. What businesses sign up, they donate items, and we create swag bags so participants can get a map and go to participating businesses, get their map validated, turn them into win one of the swag bags. So we had a ton of great swag and people had a good time. Another economic development driver opportunity for people to have reason to come into your business. Some committee happenings. Our Hispanic Business Committee held their SIP Lompoc event on November 23rd. I heard great things about that. Increased ticket sales all around. Our Military Affairs Committee held their annual barbecue. They served in excess of 700 meals to active military service members out on Vandenberg Air Force Base, as they do each year. And then our Leadership Lompoc Valley and Youth Leadership Lompoc Valley launched their 2018-19 classes. And just a couple of things to note. We are actually in Restaurant Week right now, so we have 18 participating businesses. It started yesterday, it goes through Sunday. If you go onto lompoc.com, you can look at menus. Each restaurant will have a special for $20.19, so get out there, try some great food here in Lompoc. Our Dance Lompoc event is coming up March 30th. So Samantha Scroggin with the city is actually one of our celebrity dancers, so if you're interested in more information, let me know. And that is all I have.
Questions for Ms. Wilson? Councilmember Starbuck.
Amber, what is a unique visitor?
A unique visitor is someone that goes to the website once, so it's not a repeat visitor. So if you go to my website 5 times in a month, it only counts you as one unique visitor. Good question.
Seeing no other questions, thank you for that report. We appreciate it. City Manager report, please.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I have like 3 items that I'd like to make sure we understand they're very important items. The first one is we still have our citizen survey out there on the website. It does end this Friday, so I'm asking everybody to go out there. We've had some pretty good turnout. We're up over 700 or 800 people right now, but there are 43,000 people in the city, so we could do better. But I'd like to get as many people out there going through the survey, just ask them questions of what they think is important in the city. What we'll do is, after it closes on Friday, we'll summarize all of those, and then the next important one is the goal-setting session will be March 9th here in the council chambers, which is a Saturday at 8:30 a.m. And the idea behind that is, again, to either have the council reaffirm the goals that are there, to create new goals, or to change any of the existing goals. So it'll help the staff and the citizens and the council guide the city into the next budget cycle, which is a 2-year budget cycle. The other one that's important, and again, trying to bring the citizens and everyone involved to help the city out, is we have created, and Dean Albro, our finance director here, is the person behind the curtain. He created a budget model. It's an interactive model, and it's available actually now on the website. It's for the public, the council, anybody that's out there. They can pull up the model, and Dean's going to drive you through here in just a second. It lists, it starts off showing where we currently are, and we currently are budgeting for a deficit is what we're looking at. So the goal is to have the citizens and the council and the staff, anybody that wants to do it, go through and look at where we have ideas for reductions in expenses, places to enhance revenue, places for other things if we had to enhance services. It's a fairly in-depth model, but then the second part of that is to take the survey that's right after the model and take what you've done after you've played around, because as you reduce an expense, you'll see the deficit shrinks. If you say, hey, I want to add some more staff in a certain area, the deficit's going to get a little bigger. So it's an interactive model for the citizens really to take a look and see where we are today and where we need to get to for a balanced budget. And I'm going to ask Dean if he can just give a quick overview of what it may not look quite the same on the big screen as it will online. But
I'm going to attempt to use a mouse up here. Like the boss said, this is an interactive model. You can work through it as many times as you want. It's just an active model where you can click buttons. At the top, you'll see our revenue numbers. You'll see our expense numbers. And you'll see our preliminary deficit. If you recall, in December 8th, I came to you guys and we did a workshop, and that deficit was a little bit bigger. We've got some more numbers in that are making that look better. A lot of change in staff, some revenue numbers changing, but it's looking better. It was $3.9 million. And keep in mind, that's a 2-year budget. As you work through this, there's the deficit right here, currently in white. And on this side, you'll see the adjustments. So I'm just going to click some buttons so you can see. It's hard for me to see this, so I'm going to try and work through this. If you look at the top, it's outside agencies. If you were to click one of these radios, these slides, you can change it. And I'm not picking on anybody here. I'm just doing it so you can see it work. You can see you've adjusted $108,000. And you can see your deficit got smaller. As you go through it, you work through the model. These are information buttons. You can click this, and it'll tell you a little bit about that. For this one, the example is, you can slide it, it'll move it 10% for each click. This will reduce our discretionary revenues every time you click it, our tax. This is a reduction to outside agencies. An example is we also have $15.3 thousand that we actually contribute to building maintenance for the museum. And the Lompoc Unified School District contribution for the crossing guards comes directly out of the police. So that gives you an idea of what we're talking about when you click that button. And this is all these buttons here. You can work through the whole thing. You can hold positions that we have currently in the budget status quo. Again, you can hit the buttons. It'll tell you that these are positions that were held in the 2019-17 budget. And you can work through the whole thing. They're all by sections. Let's see, let me change the page here. So we have additional vacancies you can add. You can see how I turned it red so you know you're in fire. Somebody got my humor. Come on, finances can be fun. So you can click any of these here, and you can, and again, you have the information buttons. It'll tell you a lengthy description of what you're looking at when you click that. And you can go through, you can hold some more vacancies. We have currently some vacancies that are, these are the current vacancies, and you can hold some more of the vacancies that were held in the last budget, status quo. And you can see the deficits changing. Let me go back up there and
a quick overview. We have about 28 to 30 general fund positions are currently vacant.
Yeah.
Just about 15% of the staff.
And you can go through, there's about 46 buttons you can click. I'm trying to find which one's the fire truck. I can't see it. Oh, I see
So
it.
it'll
I
be
see
much
it now.
larger on your own computer screen.
Yeah, you can see it bigger on the other screen, but, and like I said, you can see that the description for the fire truck. Well, I just wanted to make the deficit bigger so you could see when we get down to the revenue streams, you can also do that. And these are all by groups, and you can read through them. You can work through this model as many times as you want. You can do service reductions. You can do you could add like to monitor the riverbed, And again, you can ask for information on that. And you get down to the bottom, you'll see that we have enhancements for revenue streams. I wanted to point out one thing here is when you look at these, you'll see in this column right here, this is what the amount of revenues we'll see for a full budget cycle. When you click one of these, you're only going to see what we will receive in that budget cycle. And because some of them's going to have to go to vote, and then it'll take, some of them will only see for a quarter, some will see for 2 quarters. So that's why you'll see the numbers here not really matching, is because the first year we won't see that much. It'll take a while for it to come into our revenue streams. Other than that, that's the model. We're like the city manager said, we have a survey. We really encourage you to go through this model, try and balance the budget. Take the survey, put down what you put in the budget, so we can have an idea of what you guys want to see the budget to look like.
So, real quick, so right now, if you see up in that top left corner, it says a negative $2 million. So that would be the deficit with the buttons that Dean's pushed. The idea is to get that to zero. Or in a great situation, we have a surplus. But we're trying to get it down to zero. And again, that's a 2-year. So right now, that would say we have $1 million deficit in both years. And as we go through it, if we don't, you can play around with this and you can click every button, you can unclick them all. It's a great tool to have. The survey is going to be the next key piece though, because we need to know what buttons you click. This is our first go around. So it's not in a database. It's based on an Excel spreadsheet. So the survey is critical that when you go through, it'll have about 12 different questions. What did you do for this one? What did you do for this section? Did you hold anything vacant? The last one is critical too, because it says, do you have another idea? These are all ideas that we sat around as staff coming up with different ways to reduce costs, increase revenues. So that last question on the survey, I believe it's number 12, put in there, hey, I have another idea. What if we did this, this, and this that wasn't on the model? We'll look at those, and if it's something that's viable, I use the example if someone was to say, let's use the reserves in the water fund to go fix the parks. Well, we legally can't do that, so I can't add it to the budget model. But I'm sure there's ideas we haven't thought of that we can then add to this. And again, that goes for the council too. If you're reading through it and you go, well, we'll add this in there. We can do it from a expense reduction, from a revenue enhancement. We can do all kinds of different things with this model. It's designed to get everybody's input. So again, we know what everyone in the city is looking towards going forward.
Councilmember Mosby.
I asked you this question one time before. At any given time, we average about 5 to 7% vacancy in general fund already. So if you're sitting at 15%, you're already have. This is at max staff, which we've probably never ever been max staff.
Yeah, we usually do a look back of how many vacancies we've had through natural attrition. And we do budget that in there in the non-departmental section. So we do calculate it somewhere usually around 7 positions to 13 positions, and it fluctuates from year to year. And those salary savings numbers also change based upon, the big one was the change in the methodology from CalPERS when they went to the lump sum. We wouldn't see as much of a benefit when we had a vacancy, so those numbers dropped a little. So, but we do budget them in our budget, and they're anywhere between 7 to 13, depending on the look back.
Is that in this number here?
That is in the numbers, yes.
You're averaging 7 to 13 already?
Yeah, that's without clicking any buttons. We naturally budget that in. Mm-hmm.
Right. Is there, because I can think of a couple other things that could have been put in there. Just curious as to, I mean, it's not saying that it's a skewed analysis, but one way you can do that is you put the things that you want to see. But I think there's a few other things that could have been added into this.
Well, and that's where we'll take.
Yeah, I think what this is all about and why we're trying to get this up front, because I know I've learned a lot talking to all you guys as far as what you think we should be doing, and that's where a lot of this comes from, just dialogue and talking. And I encourage you to tell me, come by my office, shoot me an email, put it down in the survey, any way you can. I'm up for anything to analyze it. I'll quantitate it, and we'll put it in this model, or we'll put it in the budget.
So it is a living model in the sense that is, if we go through the survey and we find 10 people did the survey tonight, and we go in tomorrow and there's 5 more ideas, we can update the model as it goes with new thoughts and ideas.
Does this include any of the potential cannabis tax revenues estimates
Yeah, and it's very conservative because we don't have any real numbers that we can put our fingers on. Yeah, that's some of the preliminary numbers. We also got our property tax numbers, and we've had, like I said, some staff changing, and those change the numbers a lot, especially the staff changing.
Are you using the same parameters you did as for the budget with the 2% and 2.2%?
That, the model does have that in there, yes, yes it does. That's because this is directly off of the forecast model for the 10-year.
Any more questions for our finance director? Thank you very much for working on this. I know you developed a preliminary tool last time that was sort of an internal document, but I'm really excited, and I encourage the public to go to our city website and really utilize the tool, brainstorm ideas, talk with your peers and neighbors, and give us the feedback, because this is going to be a really important budget cycle to get your input on. So thank you again for doing that, and it'll be on our homepage on our website. Any additional city manager items?
No, that was it.
Okay.
Mayor,
Yes.
if I could add on a short ending to that city manager's report. At the request of a council member, and because we have what may be a complex discussion item tonight for the zoning code update, I wanted to make sure and remind the council that in order for the public to clearly understand all the points that council members are making, and for council members to be able to understand each other without getting into situations where you're talking over each other and it makes it difficult for the public to understand the points that are being made. We do have two rules in the council handbook that I wanted to read tonight. The first one is regarding obtaining the floor, which has to do with the green lights that you all have there, and I'll just read that rule. It says, every council member wishing to speak should indicate that desire by lighting their speaking light on the dais, gain the mayor's recognition, and confine all remarks to the question under debate. And then we have a separate rule that's titled interruptions that states that when a council member once recognized should not be interrupted when speaking except when called by the mayor or for a point of order or personal privilege that is raised by another member, or the speaker chooses to yield to a question by another member. So essentially the purpose of these rules is so that the council doesn't get into arguments with each other without using the process that we've established, which is to click your green light and wait to be recognized by the mayor. And that's so that all of the public and the council can clearly understand the points that are being made during deliberations. So I just wanted to remind everyone of that tonight.
Thank you. So, Councilmember Mosby, do you have a question?
I had a question for the city manager. The budget priority list, I noticed that they used the priorities from 4 years ago, not the ones we're currently under. Did you adjust that, or?
The
Council priorities that we had chosen 2 years ago.
They'd already gone out, so then if I did it now, and that was my fault, we were discussion. So I thought I was using the most recent ones, but they weren't. But there is the ability for people to add in the different thoughts and processes. No, that was my fault, looking at an older version of what, not the most current goals, but the one right before that.
If anybody's looking for those goals in the budget book, those goals are
Yes.
there for 2 years ago. Thank you.
Any other questions for city manager or city attorney before we proceed to public comment on consent calendar? Okay. The consent calendar is our next agenda item. This will be public comment on the consent calendar item. After the items listed are considered to be routine and enacted after one motion in the form listed below. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless good cause is shown prior to the council vote. Any items withdrawn from the consent calendar for separate discussion will be addressed immediately before the second oral communication near the end of the meeting. Do we have anyone wishing to speak to us on a consent calendar item? Please step forward. Seeing no one rise, I will close the consent calendar public comment and return it to council. Is there an item anyone wishes to pull? Councilmember Vega.
Nothing to pull, but I'd like to make a motion that we accept consent calendar as written.
Do I have a second on that?
I'll second.
And we have a second. Any further discussions? Seeing none, let's vote. And that passes 5-0. There are no staff presentations or announcements or requests, so we will move on to the first oral communications. This is regarding any city-related matter. It is 3 minutes. Please step forward. If there's an agenda item that you wish to speak to, you may speak to it now, but we would hope that you stay for the actual agenda item.
Thank you for that great budget tool for the website. That is really a neat addition. But please return the archived City Council meeting minutes, agendas, and videos back to the previous easily accessed format. Concurrent with our new leadership, the videos have become buried and are very difficult to locate, specific ones aligned with meetings. Bad people and policies thrive in darkness. As the permitting department testimony of January 15th provided a window into corrupt practices, the grease trap policy testimony of February 5th reveals opportunities to better serve citizens. Instead of focusing on what text important notices require, focus instead on wording which not only informs but educates and assists citizens on available options within that policy. If a policy or rule hasn't been required of citizens for the past 20 or 30 years, absent unfavorable outcomes, perhaps it is an unnecessary requirement. The fact a rule is not unreasonable and should not put anyone out of business is not a valid reason for government intervention. When a grease trap interceptor is required of a business that does no cooking, opens the door to requiring superfluous equipment and make-work projects to further destroy small businesses and force the middle class out of California. To follow all dictates from Sacramento moves this gem of a small town down the path of the Venezuela model. Once the richest country in South America, the most natural resources, and a healthy middle class, Venezuela's government overreach has destroyed this once prosperous country and starved its people. The once great state of California now has the highest level of poverty, rate of homelessness, and homeless population in the nation. The once first in the nation in education is now nearly dead last. The middle class has been leaving California in droves. San Diego applies bleach to the streets and sidewalks to control hepatitis A outbreaks. Typhus is breaking out among city personnel in Los Angeles, spread by rat fleas, which begs the question, should we anticipate the return of bubonic plague in California, also carried by rat fleas? Lompoc government has expanded over 50% in 20 years, while citizen services have been reduced. I urge you to reevaluate permitting policies and rules for businesses. Eliminate those which do little more than advance tyranny. Tell Sacramento we got off the Venezuela train.
Thank you.
Honorable Mayor and City Council, I'd like to add a comments about the item later on that would be the zoning issue in the city. It has come to my attention that the city staff have amended the proposed zoning changes after it was approved by the Planning Commission. If this understanding of mine is correct, then the city has violated the state law which prohibit a document approved by the Planning Commission from being amended before it is presented to the City Council. If this is correct, then the Council should not take any action tonight and table the matter to be presented to the Planning Commission for their action. As most of you know, the property owners and business entities in the city worked hard and demonstrated to the elected and appointed official the change in zoning ordinance to improve the business and community, the business and economy of the city. This took almost 10 years. Now suddenly staff wiped out most of these efforts without following the rule that all of us have to follow. I urge the City Council to please consider tabling this item and send it back to the Planning Commission if staff has made changes. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good evening, Council. John Lynn, Lompoc resident. First, I wanted to introduce into the record of the meeting a letter that I previously sent to all of you and to the city staff regarding the issue that Mr. Sapani spoke of. But then I want to take a moment to talk about how we've proceeded with this zoning. It's been different from what we've done in the past. So I spent the whole weekend trying to collate all the various documents, the red line version, the July version, the January version, trying to gain an understanding of zoning. And having been involved in it since the 80s when I was chamber president, I think I have a pretty good grasp of it, but I found it very difficult to collate all those documents. And what I realized about noon on Sunday was that I was doing something I'd never done before, because every other time that we had had something of this nature come to the council, whether I was on the council or seated out here in the audience, we got a complete document. We didn't have to take pieces from several places and try to make them go together. And I think that it's a disadvantage to you, but even more so to the public who doesn't understand how to put these pieces together. So really, if I had as much trouble as I have, and I'm sure you had trouble with your gray and white red line version, the public has even more difficulty. And in the past, what we received was a complete document that represented all of the changes, whether it was an ordinance, whether it was a zoning matter, or whether it was the general plan. Then everyone could look at the complete document, make decisions, and you could do the same. So I would hope that after tonight, number one, that we wouldn't take any action on some of these things that there are legal issues with regard to, and number two, that you would ask the staff to bring back a complete document that we'd all look at. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no one else rise, we'll close the general oral communication and move on to the appointment portion of our agenda items. The first is council appointments to various boards, commissions, and committees. Councilmember Starbuck.
I'd like to appoint Becky Barrett to the Beautification and Appearance Commission.
I'll say it.
That has been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Let's vote. And that is approved 5-0. Councilmember Cordova, I believe that you also have some appointments you may want to make.
Yes, I would like to appoint Suraj Patel to the Economic Development Committee.
Okay, may I have a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion?
Which position?
Her position on the Economic Development Committee, the Cordova appointment for 2020. Okay. So that has been moved and seconded, and some discussion. Any other questions? Okay, let's vote. And that passes 5-0. And then I believe you also have a planning appointment that you were considering?
Yes.
Okay.
I would like to appoint Christopher M. Braxton to the Planning Commission.
I'll give you a second on that. Any other questions, discussions on that? Okay, let's vote. And that passes 5-0. Any other appointments? There's some open positions. Councilmember Vega?
Yes, I'd like to appoint Mr. Dan Burrell to the Economic Development Committee as the appointed position. And then Mr. Burrell is here tonight, so thank you very much for applying. I appreciate that.
Okay,
I'll second.
thank you. So it's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Let's vote. And that passes 5-0. So thank you all for your applications and congratulations on your appointments. We thank you for volunteering your time on these important committees. The second appointment is regarding a council representative to the Community Action Commission. We did get clarification from the organization that it needs to be a direct representation from council. Councilmember Vega has dutifully served for the past couple of years and has stepped down. It meets the first Wednesday at 7 p.m. in Solvang, so I'm looking for a volunteer who might be interested in representing the community from council. Seeing no one make the motion, I will volunteer to take that on because I'm happy to fill that position.
I'll second.
I'm sure you will. Any discussion? All right, let's vote. And that passes 5-0. So Community Action Commission now has its council appointee. So I will add that to my calendar. And I want to thank them for all the work they do in supporting the social network within our community, and I look forward to expanding what they can provide. The next issue on the agenda is the public hearing for considering Planning Commission recommendations for approval of the comprehensive update to Title 17 of the Lompoc Municipal Code and adoption of resolutions number 6237 parentheses 19 through 6240 parentheses 19 and introduction of ordinance numbers 1662 19 through 1665 19. And we have Planning Manager Brian Halverson to make the presentation.
That was a mouthful. Honorable Mayor, members of the council, I wanted to start off by just introducing this item before we do a formal presentation of the update to Title 17, which is the zoning code. I'd like to just start by thanking everyone that's worked on the zoning code. It's been a long journey. It's actually only been 3 years. There's been a lot of numbers thrown out, but it's been 3 years. Probably what took the longest was the general plan, I've been told, even though I wasn't here at the time, but it was about an 8-year effort. So 3 years, not too bad, considering during that time we also got a sign ordinance approved. So we're very happy about that. Also during this time, we've had significant public outreach. A lot of you that are in the audience tonight, I've personally talked to on the phone or in person. You've expressed your concerns. We've tried to work through a variety of issues in the zoning code. I can say there's been certain individuals who I've personally, spent hours with trying to get a code that represents Lompoc. We've also had about 20 public participation opportunities, so that's workshops, hearings, really a variety of opportunities, even a joint workshop with the Planning Commission and the City Council. To just be very transparent with the zoning code, highlighting the major changes, display boards, a variety of media in order to reach out. In addition, we've passed over 320 flyers announcing these workshops and upcoming public hearings. I can't really take credit for that because our planners personally went out and walked on foot, boots on the sidewalk, and talked to business owners, personally handed them flyers to try to get them to come and express their input on this huge effort. That being said, the code will never be perfect. The code is ever-changing. As new laws are passed, the code has to be updated. An example of that is new housing laws, accessory dwelling units is relatively new, density bonus rules, etc. So it is a moving target at times, but we try our best. Also, please consider that public health and safety is extremely important. It's always on our mind, even in the consideration of adoption of a new zoning code. Very, very important. I'd like to thank department staff, including retired planning manager Lucille Breeze, who, like I said, worked on the general plan update, which we call the 2030 general plan. She did an excellent job working, as I mentioned, over 8 years on that to get that approved. And that's really the first step, is to get your general plan updated, and then the zoning ordinance. And then if you have a lot of money, you do it both at the same time, which is very difficult. Also, I'd like to thank our consultant, which is Lisa Wise Consulting, who will give the presentation in just a moment. They've been very patient with us, and I really appreciate that because there have been times where you really need to have thick skin to do a project like this. Of course, the Planning Commission, over 5 hearings, and I know some of the Planning Commission commissioners are here this evening, both the past and the current Planning Commissioners. We have some new Planning Commissioners, which I look forward to working with, as well as current and past City Council members. I don't know if the former mayor is here tonight, but I appreciate all his efforts as well, and the current council, digging in and really trying to understand the code, and just their commitment of updating a code that is, last time was a wholesale comprehensive update was 1974, so 45 years ago, and that's a long time. So real quickly, just a couple housekeeping items. In the very, very back, there's a table that has our general plan, 2030 general plan, our existing zoning code, and then to the far right, if the public wants to look at a copy of the draft code, that's there as well, those smaller binders. It's very, very important that you have the code that we're going to speak about tonight, and that's the July 2018 code. Now, the red lines, which Mr. Lynn spoke about, those are, we purposely didn't print brand new codes because that is costly and it hasn't been adopted yet. It hasn't been reviewed. And so we have the red lines of the changes, and then we have the code that we've had under review since July of 2018. So we have that available. We also, someone brought up the fact that the red lines might be difficult to read if they're in black and white, and I apologize for that. But we do have some copies of the red back there. And lastly, with that being said, I would like to just hand over a short presentation to Jennifer Doherty, who will go ahead and talk about some of the high points of the zoning ordinance, and then we can get into staff questions from there.
Brian, if I could just also note one more thing. Also on the table in the back of the room, and I now officially enter into the record of this hearing, are the resolutions adopted by the Planning Commission recommending the City Council to adopt the zoning code update. I just needed to add that for the record. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Good evening, Mayor Osborne, council members. It's very exciting to be here in front of you tonight after this long effort. Many of you have been involved at various meetings over the past 3+ years on the zoning code update. We thank you for your time. Tonight I'll present key highlights from the zoning code update, and I'm planning to keep it to just about 10 minutes. The slides we have, it's a little hard to see, they are numbered. We can come back to any of those slides during the discussion. Well, as Brian mentioned, it's been about 3.5 years. We've had about 20 opportunities for public comment at workshops, at hearings, at open houses. And we've worked diligently with the public to incorporate comments that we've heard throughout that time into the draft code before you tonight. Tonight, the council's being asked to receive public comment and to take action on the zoning code update through adopting the attached resolutions to your staff report as recommended by Planning Commission, and make the supplemental amendments to the general plan and zoning map for consistency. As Brian mentioned, the 2030 general plan is the overarching policy guidance for the city. It was adopted in 2014, and the zoning code is the key tool to implement your general plan. The general plan provides direct guidance for the zoning code, including specific land use designations and density standards, promoting revitalization and high-quality mixed-use projects, creating a new zone, the H Street overlay, that allows for mixed use, including housing along H Street, as well as creating a pedestrian-friendly environment along H Street. Also, the general plan has policies for encouraging housing, and that's also reflective of state law requirements. So getting into some of the key highlights, one of the major goals for the update is to create a user-friendly code. The draft code includes tables and graphics to help illustrate and organize standards clearly, and the structure of the code has also been updated to improve usability. The code has been modernized and streamlined. Outdated uses have been replaced with broader use terms and categories that provide more longevity and flexibility in the code. The code also is streamlined by allowing more uses, especially desired uses, to be approved by right, in terms of being just permitted, or by allowing them to be approved at a staff level, rather than going through a conditional use permit, which requires Planning Commission approval. So there are fewer CUPs required in the code, more options for those staff level approvals. In terms of modernization, the code has also incorporated best practices across a number of different categories and have those best practices tailored to Lompoc's need and community input. There are two key changes proposed to the commercial zones themselves, and these are direct changes from public feedback. The first is to eliminate the commercial office zone, or the CO zone, and those parcels would be rezoned to planned commercial development, or PCD. The other is the incorporation of the Old Town Specific Plan into the code, and that would allow the Old Town Specific Plan to be rescinded, reducing duplication, redundancy, and potential for conflict between the code and the specific plan. The commercial office zone properties are generally located in the southeastern area of town along Ocean. This map shows those 66 commercial office zone properties that would be rezoned to PCD. The Cypress Court parcel here at the southwest corner of Ocean and 7th requires a little bit more attention based on Planning Commission's recommendation. For the Cypress Court site, the portion on the south end of the site is recommended to be zoned with residential zoning to allow residential uses on the site. An R3 zone proposed for the existing developed portion of the site, and R2 zoning for the vacant parcel along Cypress Avenue. The R2 zoning would allow for a maximum of 6 units on that site. Now, a 15-unit affordable housing project is currently proposed on that site under the commercial office zoning. That is going before Planning Commission on the 27th of this month. And Council's action on the rezoning of this parcel would not necessarily determine whether or not that project could be approved based on the protections in place under state law for affordable housing projects. New standards are proposed for the Old Town area and H Street overlay. These are to implement the Old Town and H Street designations from the general plan. The general plan's guidance for these zones are to bring buildings to the street, require parking behind to help create that pedestrian attractive environment. To encourage or to implement that, the zoning code includes a build-to standard in both Old Town and in the H Street overlay, which would require 60% of the frontage of a property along H Street or Ocean to be occupied by a building. So that would bring the building along 60% at least of the frontage to the street. There is flexibility built into these standards for the design of plazas, courtyards, alternative building entrances, as well as the preservation of existing landscaping or trees and things of that nature. So there is flexibility with these standards built into the code. Housing would also be allowed more flexibly in these zones in terms of in Old Town, residential uses would be allowed on the first floor, just not along the street front. And in H Street, residential uses would be allowed, but just not on the first floor at intersections. So some limitations there, but far more flexible than current restrictions. The general plan it describes the vision for Old Town of being pedestrian-oriented. As a result, auto-oriented uses are not allowed, such as drive-through or auto sales, repair, and the uses of those nature. However, based on the joint workshop we had with Planning Commission and Council, flexibility has been incorporated into the code where sites that have had previous drive-through uses or auto-oriented uses would be allowed and could be reinstated through a conditional use permit. And the city has identified those lots. There's 7 in total, 2 with drive-throughs, 5 with auto uses. So those are clearly outlined and staff can track those. The desire for food service and accommodating special events in the industrial zones has been consistently voiced throughout our process. And in response to that, restaurants and outdoor dining would be allowed in the industrial zones. They would be allowed with the approval of a staff level permit. And there would be no cap in terms of the square footage of restaurants allowed in the industrial zones. However, Planning Commission recommended that chain restaurants or formula restaurants where there are 10 or more of those restaurants in existence worldwide, that those restaurants would not be allowed in the industrial zones to preserve the unique character of the area. Food service would continue to be allowed in the industrial zones with a special use permit. That was adopted by council in a relatively recent ordinance. The special event overlay is proposed to apply to all industrial zones. This was generated through feedback we heard, particularly out of the wine community, but it would apply to all uses in the industrial or all properties in the industrial zone. We know this is a hot topic tonight, and I will talk about this as well as with staff at the end of this presentation. Mobile vending standards have been updated. You'll see that in your red line packet in response to recent staff law changes. The city attorney has worked closely on those regulations, and they allow for both sidewalk and mobile vendors as outlined in state law. However, those vendors would not be allowed to operate on state highway. Operational standards are included for those types of vendors, such as prohibiting operating hours from 2:30 a.m. to 6 a.m., requiring 4 feet of clearance on sidewalks. Things of that nature are incorporated into the code, and a vendor's permit would have to be obtained to ensure requirements such as those are adhered to. There are some standards that exist in multiple places in the municipal code now, and we're intending to streamline that with the zoning code. For instance, cannabis locational restrictions are now in Title 9. You'll now see them in the use tables for the zones. We would repeal the locational standards in Title 9 to ensure we don't have duplication, potential inconsistencies later. Commercial filming permits, also located in 2 portions of the municipal code. We're proposing to incorporate the standards in its entirety in the zoning code so we don't have duplication there. The commercial filming permits is something we'll have to fold in its entirety before the second reading. A handful or a few follow-up items that would occur subsequent to the zoning code update. That includes wireless telecommunication facilities in the city's right-of-way. Those would be addressed in Title 12. The zoning code would require design review permits for those, but doesn't include the specific standards for those facilities in the right-of-way. The architectural design guidelines would be amended to ensure consistency with the zoning code. And lastly, the noise ordinance is anticipated to be revised to reflect some streamlining or adjustments, but because of the additional CEQA required for that, that would be due in a subsequent work effort. So in summary, we have taken the last 3.5 years of public comment to implement the general plan's vision through the zoning code, to also encourage desired projects and provide certainty to the development process. And some of those key changes are allowing residential in the H Street overlay, allowing restaurants in the industrial zones, not requiring a conditional use permit for retail uses, having Old Town standards in one place in the code, not in the specific plan, and creating a user-friendly code that incorporates tables and graphics and comprehensive definitions. So back to the special event overlay and accessory uses in the industrial zone. So changes have been made after the Planning Commission hearings and recommendations, and those changes were made in response to comments staff received from the Building and Fire Department. Those changes are specific to special events, that special events cannot exceed the approved occupancy load. That was not a recommendation that Planning Commission made. That the maximum number of events would be limited to 4 events per building per quarter. Planning Commission's recommendation was that that limit be on a per tenant basis rather than per building. And that a temporary use permit would not be required only if an indoor special event did not exceed 749 square feet or 10% of the gross floor area. That was not a recommendation from Planning Commission. Additionally, limitation on the amount of accessory uses in the industrial zone was changed to 10% of the gross floor area. Planning Commission recommended that that percent be 20% with wine tasting rooms exempt. The current limit in the zoning code is 15, so the reduction down to 10 would be more restrictive than what is in the zoning code today. So I know that these changes come as a concern to many of you that have been involved in the process throughout this time, and so I'm just going to turn it over to staff to respond to or discuss these changes.
Yeah, I just wanted to give a quick recap and expand on this a little bit more since a lot of people are concerned. And I do appreciate that a lot of you have come to me or other planners or in general different departments, fire or building, regarding these changes. As I mentioned when I introduced this item, is of utmost importance is public health and safety. So after the Planning Commission meeting, there were some big concerns from a public health and safety standpoint with events, and not just for the wine industry, but it would be for any event that is in a building that may not be designed, engineered for that use. As far as the code, I keep emphasizing the July 2018 code. This code is still intact, and it's still what is being considered tonight. As far as the red line version, which was changed to address public health and safety, those are simply recommendations, and so the council tonight has the recommendations from the Planning Commission, but they also have this code, and they can make whatever decisions, as you know. It's going to be very important for the fire department and for the building department to speak tonight, because some of these changes are really not zoning changes. They are related to fire and building code. And so some of these changes, I know, I've talked to a lot of people in the wine industry and they actually agree, but other changes you do not. But I do just want to emphasize that these changes, or as a recommendation, nothing has been, in stone yet, was for building, for public health and safety. Also, I just want to reemphasize that if you had a brewery, or let's say someone was doing a wedding, it's not just for wine. Usually when an event is special, it just means that that's not a use that you typically find in that district. You don't typically see people having weddings in warehouse buildings, or you don't typically do certain activities in that district, and so we make it special. It's a use that is not continuous. It's usually a 72-hour period, and it's something that they're not doing every day. That being said, I do want to just emphasize that that was the goal, and it is simply just a recommendation. And with that in mind, I don't want to go too much into the last slides because you have your staff report and the recommendations are pretty long, and I know we're going to go through them item by item, and I know there's a lot of people that want to speak, but I just wanted to close with those last that last input from staff. We are available. That concludes our presentation. We are available to answer any questions at this time, and I really appreciate for everyone hearing our short presentation.
Thank you. This is a very long item with very detailed needs for us to discuss. So before we move forward on that, there are those of us who may need to recuse ourselves from a portion of the discussions. And so there's also potentially a need to not go page by page, but actually address the larger issues that we have before us in potentially updating and accepting the recommendations from Planning Commission and or staff. So before we start that discussion, I would like to propose to council that we call out any major issue that we definitively need to discuss rather than potentially turning it into page turning tonight, so that we can address the bigger issues, move some of this zoning code forward if possible, and if there's anything that needs to be revisited, focus on that this evening. Any feedback regarding that potential way of addressing this issue? Councilmember Vega.
I agree. I think we should go and take larger issues and let everybody bring up their concerns, and then take public comment after that, and instead of going page by page or line by line.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Starbuck.
All right, well, I want to start this. I've been on this council a long time. I approved the contract to hire the consultant to do the project. One of the biggest concerns was we didn't want it to become an election issue. It was going to be done in October. Well, now it's the middle of February. It's not done, and I have a prediction that it probably won't be done tonight. We've been working on this for over 3 years. 3 years. How many meetings? How many workshops? Hours, hours and hours. And then all of a sudden, within the last 2 weeks, staff has input. Where was staff in 1974? Where was staff 3.5 years ago? What happened? It's a train wreck. I mean, if this is how we have conducted business on something as important as our zoning ordinance, think about what our reputation is to the businesses out there. This isn't just a wine, this is the whole city. And here it is. We could have approved this if we'd have left it alone. Years ago, Building and Fire did not want to participate in planning documents. We brought this up under street vendors. There was a traffic ordinance that was contrary to general plan 2 zoning. This is insanity what's happened here. I personally have asked for a definition on spot zoning. I have gone through every aspect of this zoning code without a single definition on spot zoning. I'm ready to throw this thing out and start over again suddenly. It is so humiliating and frustrating to me to have to sit up here and listen to this again and again.
Any questions for staff? Seeing none, we'll open for public comment. If you would like to speak, there's 3 minutes. Please come forward to the podium.
Okay, my name's Steve Arrowwood. I'm with a winery, Montemar, and I've been following this for a long time, but not as long as you. since before the contract came out. And what I'd like to do is I would like the council members to stop and think just over the next night or few days about the wine business. How do you want to treat wine tourism in Lompoc? I mean, how do you envision it? Pro or anti? The latest language is anti, okay? It's so, I personally, as a wine person, I can't believe we're not in the top 5 things, a part of the plan. I mean, 8th Street, these kind of things, these are all important. But think about Lompoc, okay? We're sitting next to some of the best grapes on the planet, okay? Paso Robles, I went to Cal Poly in the 70s. No one knew where Paso was. Everybody who graduated from high school wanted to leave Paso. Not one person in the country wanted to move to Paso. And no one knew where it was. And Paso is a beautiful place. Wine has changed Paso. 100% of Paso is changed by wine, okay? And many people around the country aspire to live in Paso. Same with San Ynez. And all our neighbors have benefited from wine. I've been here 6 years, we're starting to benefit from wine. This is going to slow it down. I would suggest that Paso and San Ynez without wine is going to look a lot like Lompoc. It's going to be a place that most of the businesses are struggling, that the city's revenues are insufficient to give citizens like myself, I live in Lompoc, the services that we expect to get, okay? So as a city, I would think that it's in our best interest for that to be in the plan to take advantage of that. We have about 10,000 nights of people sleeping here for wine. In the valley, it's about 250,000. In Paso, it's 1 million. 1 million hotel nights, okay? They're just building more hotels all there to fill it up with wine people. And how many people live in Paso that relocated to Paso? They fill up the businesses and they fill up the restaurants. That is going to be our future. If the city doesn't help it, it will just take longer, okay? So first, we should not have industrial rules. We should have wine rules, okay? Then we can have special wine rules that we don't have to worry about warehouses throwing weddings that aren't in the winery. Have wine rules specific to that, and if you want to have zoning for the rest of the industrial areas, you can, but really, we need industrial areas. They should stay industrial. We shouldn't be putting restaurants in every industrial area. We should put in a wine ghetto where the people are going to come. So step back, think about it from a wine point of view, then rewrite the bad rules. Most of them are sitting in that special overlay zone, but there's also lots of stuff like why would you need a MUP for a restaurant in a wine ghetto, okay? No other restaurants need MUPs. So get the planning and the city around writing the zoning as a industry that we want to see grow. It's the only industry that's going to completely change Lompoc for the better. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor, Councilman, my name's Steve Bridge, local businessman, been here for a few years. I think most of you know my concerns. The regulations that came in the last minute, that might be a charged way to say it, but seem to come in the last minute, are really the crux of the legitimate concerns, I think. We can have honest disagreements about 749 or 850 or whatever the number should be, but that should be transparent and should be in front of all of us, not brought in after we all think we're done. So my recommendation is you push it back to the Planning Commission and allow that kind of transparency to occur, at least on those sections that have been identified as requiring change. I also would like to make 2 other suggestions, or one, depending how you look at it. In all the Planning Commission meetings, and I've heard the DS here state that it can't be perfect. We're doing the best we can, which I personally believe is true. You know, perfect's the enemy of good enough. But the idea is it's easy to change. I've also heard those words. So I would like you to have a motion or a rule or whatever the right word is, where after whatever zoning goes in place, that a citizen or a business can come back with a change, and it will not have a cost to exceed $500 to make that suggested change. Or if they have to have a CUP because there's been additional regulations, or an MUP, that also would not exceed $500. And that'll allow us to, as citizens, perhaps impact it, because if we had to pay the full price of a planning code change and submit it, I believe it's much more expensive than that. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name's Dan Kessler. I am the owner and I operate Kessler Hawk Wines Tasting Room in the Santa Rita Hills Wine Center next to the Home Depot. I would like to encourage a special event overlay zone section be reverted back to what was agreed to between discussions with planning and the wine community. Music, live or otherwise, art shows and similar kinds of event and wine club pickup parties are part of regular business activities for the tasting rooms and should not be considered special events because they aren't something a large group of people attend simultaneously. No permit should be required for these types of activities. Special events in this section should be defined by the number of people simultaneously attending in mind. In addition, the new proposed ordinance randomly constrains the area of an indoor event to a maximum of 749 square feet and limits the number of events per building to 4 each quarter. These restrictions are particularly onerous for many of us in the wine industry. Number one, they limit the size of a special event to a maximum of roughly 50 people based on fire regulations. And two, in situations like mine, the 6 tenants in the building that I operate out of limit each tenant to 2.6 events per year. The language in the ordinance needs to revert back to what was agreed upon in discussions with planning, 2 events per tenant per quarter with no restrictions on event area within the building. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jack Carmine. I'm a resident of Lompoc. First, I want to say good evening, council members, planners, citizens, for giving this matter your attention. I'll let other people address the potential Brown Act issues and some of the building details. My concern is for the limitation on numbers of events, the definition of an event, and I'm here to speak for the arts. I was born and raised in Lompoc. I moved back about 5 years ago to be part of the art and music renaissance I see happening in my hometown. My background is all art and music. I've been a presenter, promoter, performer, poetry teacher, curator, reporter, volunteer, advocate, and most often an audience for art and music. And I have some skin in the game. I work in the wine business, and I get about 20% of my income outside of that as a disc jockey, playing records most often for pickup parties, different wine business functions, and in all kinds of places. So one constant in all my experience in the arts and music is that before the galleries, before the concert halls, art and music happens first in small businesses because of the largesse of the hair salon that lets you hang their paintings, the poets reading in coffee shops, and singer-songwriters playing in the corner at a winery. Constant. It's where it happens. The rising tide of art and music connected to the local wine industry in particular has been a real engine for the artists as well as for the wineries. And let's not forget, this is very important, the local charities rely on music and wine for their fundraising events. So think about if we're putting a damper on that pipeline, money going to charities in our community. So in my opinion, this cooperation is clearly good for our economy, our culture, and our community between these entities. So let's not set up roadblocks with excess permitting and limitations on the size of the area in which these events can take place. Art and music are not special, they're not luxuries, they're basic functions of humanity and civilization. And please remember, art and music are speech, free speech, protected speech, and the curation, display, performance, and discussion of art and music are building blocks of community and democracy. So putting limits on where, how many, what kind, truly problematic from that perspective. So I know you all want to be part of the rising tide in this community, so let's draft a zoning ordinance promotes the arts in the City of Arts and Flowers. So I'm urging you to send these revisions back for more public comment and a more thoughtful approach so that we don't cut off our nose to spite our face. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Jacob Cole. My area of residence is Lompoc, California. I am a musician, artist, and teacher associated with Certain Sparks Music and other creative groups within the greater Santa Barbara area. I've been playing in wine tasting rooms for the better part of 7 years. This is where I got my start. I don't consider myself to be an expert on the wine industry, but while playing music and entertaining in this environment, I have seen firsthand the positive impact and growth the wine industry and growing music and art communities have had on our humble town. Playing in these tasting rooms has afforded me the opportunity to support my lifestyle as an artist while maintaining a healthy creative output. I believe one of the indicators of a healthy community, the kind of place that is likely to be loved and to endure, is good evidence of creative expression, whether it's painting, photography, music, dance, sculpture, performance, or something else. People like being around artists who inspire not just our rational selves, but also our more intuitive, right side of the brain selves. And I'd also like to read something briefly from Jeremy Ball, a friend of mine who I believe emailed you guys this letter. I'd like to speak specifically to the intensity of regulations proposed for wine tasting rooms and special events. I'm very concerned that certain last-minute changes to the zoning ordinance could have a lasting negative impact on our city. The rippling effect could create a series of unintended consequences for local nonprofits, the arts and music scene, the tourism and hospitality sector, etc. The three areas of impact to consider from a big picture perspective are: one, nonprofits. This sector is doing something and some of the hardest and most compassionate work in our area, from helping the homeless to teaching music. These nonprofits often depend on charitable contributions and special fundraising at events to boost awareness and funding for their cause. If regulations are too restrictive on what special events, nonprofits will be the first to lose, as wineries will no longer want to use up their limited number of events for a nonprofit. Instead, those events will be reserved for business-only related events, provided that the proposed square footage regulations hasn't wiped out all events in this location. The second is arts and music. One of the elements that I have come to love the most about our town is the incredible artistic talent that lives here. From artists to musicians to dancers, the tapestry and beauty that they create is something that should be nurtured and treasured. They are a big part of our communal heartbeat. The opportunity for this sector to thrive in this area is already limited. We should be creating regulations that encourage the development of opportunities for all artists. And lastly, on economics, there's a story for each unique impact that these updated regulations could impose on a winery and tasting room. I will only recount one possible scenario that was mentioned to me. Imagine a winery that has a couple of wine pickup events at their tasting room, and as a result of a change in regulation, a winery could potentially move their event to Los Alamos or Buellton. What would the immediate impact look like? First, 50 to 75 people would no longer drive to Lompoc, fill up the gas, eat at one of our restaurants, or stay in one of our hotels. In addition to this, that person is no longer buying wine here or attaching a great experience to Lompoc. What happens when this type of event goes away, times a few wineries, times a few years? What happens when Lompoc gains the reputation of being the toughest place to be in the wine industry? You get the picture. These aren't intended consequences, but the impacts are huge. The big picture is, please work diligently with the industry and community to craft sensible regulations that puts the focus on drawing business in rather than pushing them away. And thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Hi, Kate Griffith, Flying Goat Cellars. Thank you for allowing me to speak this evening. I just would like to also request that the council members push these proposals that are related to the wine industry back to the Planning Commission. As a former planning commissioner, I find it surprising that the staff recommendations have been able to get this far without going through the regular process. And it is especially detrimental to the wine industry because of the fact that most of us share buildings, and to have only 4 special events per year in shared buildings is absurd. And the number of, for Flying Goat to have a special event is a much different thing than for my neighbor Palmina to have a special event. And I'm sure many of my colleagues would say the same. But there's also another kind of special event that takes place in some of our buildings, and that is nonprofit. We've been allowing the Lompoc Valley Beekeepers to meet in our building, in our space, for the past few years because it's not in use in the evening once a month. And Lompoc Valley Beekeepers provide a service to the city of Lompoc Fire Department and to the police by removing bees that are not wanted in certain sections of, in town. So, it's kind of, we've been doing a public service by providing a meeting place for the beekeepers. If we're not allowed to, if this is going to be one of my 4, I'm going to have to exclude that. And, even if we have 4 pickup parties a year and we have to share that, it's just really going to be contrary to the well-being of our business. So I really request that council members reconsider or consider sending this back to the Planning Commission where it should go, and then opening it up to public comment, because really we should want to utilize our space in the best manner that we can, and that would be inclusive of allowing some nonprofit meetings and at least for special events. And the other question I would like to pose to you is this whole definition of special events. We heard Mr. Halverson say that his interpretation of special events, but that's the first time that I've heard that particular definition, and which seems a little bit broader than what I'm understanding. So I think there's a lot of ambiguity about what constitutes special events. So I think there needs to be clarification in that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Erica Johnson. I'm a homeowner and a business owner here in Lompoc. First of all, I would like to say I fully support all the incredible comments that we've heard so far, because you guys said it way better than I ever could. So I'm just going to add my own perspective. I was really excited when I relocated here to learn about Lompoc's music and wine and art scene. In fact, that's one of the reasons I chose to move here. I'm in the business of promoting cultural events for over 15 years, and my particular area of focus is to try to bring music from outside the area of Lompoc to help put this town more on the cultural scope. I believe that's kind of in line with everyone's business plan, including probably the city's. So the artists that we bring to town, touring musicians and artists, and all kinds of businesses really, but that's my focus, eat in restaurants, buy the wine here, network with other artists in town, they stay in the hotels, and more importantly, they take their experience, a positive experience, away with them, back, and then help spread the word that Lompoc should be included in a larger cultural scene. I'm concerned that these new rules are, as they're currently proposed, will effectively harm our delicate, still growing cultural climate in Lompoc. It will make it more difficult for alternative venues to put on events and limit their ability to pay artists enough to make it plausible for them to perform in Lompoc. In the interest of creating a more supportive scene for music, art, and commerce, I urge the council to review these changes and listen to your community's needs. They've been excellently explained so far, and I'm sure that it's going to be a long night. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Brian Cole, 28-year resident of Lompoc, former business owner, as a matter of fact, who you guys probably remember, Holland by Runes down at the south side there. I consider myself at this point retired, but a musical activist nonetheless, and that's my main focus here. As a teacher and a musician and a business owner, 2009 to 2014, I just wanted to share with you from 10 years ago now, My mission statement was acting as a catalyst for creation and cultural center for the community. Howlin' Byroon's Music Exchange nurtures the young and not so young with music lessons, instruments, and live performances on the Central Coast. That's a pretty important thing to set as a mission for a business. Even though it might not have been zoned in that fashion, but still, I went ahead with that because regular live music performances, they were always, to me, an ongoing adjunct to my particular business, and coordinated with the connected coffee shop, Southside Coffee Company, it just promotes community involvement, and it enabled me to host benefits and fundraisers. In one instance, over $2,000 for a benefit, and I was really proud of that, as many more things happened along the way in terms of giving young people a chance to increase the level of what they learned in music lessons. My long-term vision was to have young and not so young students to have a place to play, not just an open mic, but to maybe play on my stage that I had deliberately built at the back of the store at that time, and then eventually to go to our local theater, which incidentally I was helpful in getting that started too, the Lompoc Theater Project, because that was part of my MO, is to have that long-term plan on having a great cultural community, which we are just on the verge of having. We have the ability to do that. Does the future of Lompoc include supportive places like the Lompoc Wine Factory, which in my opinion is one of the only places where people of my age group, let's say, can go during the day, hear great music, and do not have to go to a late night nightclub and drink for just a drink and to be loud and obnoxious. That's not my scene. Maybe 100 years ago or so it was, but not anymore. So I would just like to see more places like the Wine Factory encouraged and open up. Now, as long as public safety and fire codes are respected, it seems ludicrous to charge any small businessman who wants to generate a bit more commerce and business in general for the city to not do that. And my time's almost up here, but I just think it's encouraging to have the dialogue with you guys. I think we have one of the best sitting councils that we've ever had here. So we need to access this wisdom. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor, council members, my name's Tom Davidson. I'm a local commercial broker. I don't have time to go through all of the problems I have with this. Several of the previous speakers have brought this up, but this feels to me like an ordinance that was done by dartboard. And I don't know who has it, but 749 square feet shows up several places in this. A restaurant, the size of a special event. I mean, who dreamed that up? Why not 637 or 849? I mean, really. And this idea of 4 events per building, again, who's dartboard? Why not 6? I mean, some of this stuff is arbitrary, onerous, makes no logical sense. One other example, you want to reduce the amount of office allowed in a building in the industrial area, so 10%. So you don't want me to bring another DenMat here? I mean, they have 25% office. They also have 385 employees. So if you want high tech, if you want R&D, if you want high paying jobs, this is not the way to go about it. And if you wonder why all the people here don't like government and are upset, over-regulation, arbitrary, dartboard kinds of zoning, I mean, if you really listen to the wine community, this certainly doesn't show it. You need to send this back to the Planning Commission and get it fixed.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Charles Summer. I'm a Parks and Recreation Commissioner. I was very disappointed to hear that Planning Commission came up with a plan. They had meetings about it. They directed staff to create this ordinance, and then it came back not the same as they asked for it. As a commissioner, I feel very blessed to be part of city government. Thank you, Councilmember Mosby, for appointing me. I've been there for about 5 years now, and all of you have appointed someone to either commission, and I think it's a blatant disrespect towards your proxies at Planning Commission for staff to undermine your commissioners and do something that did not ask them to do. The organizational chart on the city website has the people, the council, and then you have the committees, commissioners, and boards. And then comes city staff. And it is, I think, a blatant disrespect towards the commissioners that you've appointed to Planning Commission for them to rewrite what they agreed to be part of this zoning agreement. So it's very disappointing to hear, and I think that you as council should take the power back, give the power to the proxies that you've appointed to Planning Commission, and force staff to rewrite this zoning ordinance to what Planning Commission had originally drafted. Thank you.
Thank you.
Honorable Mayor, City Council, City of Lompoc, Darrell Tullis. Ludicrous. You talked about a $2 million deficit and the possibility of maybe getting us to a surplus. How do you do that if you limit bringing in entertainment? How do you do that if you limit bringing in people who would spend money here in our town? I share a building with a church for my church service on Sundays. Can you imagine if I was told that I could only have 4 special events throughout the year? I need at least 52. So please rethink this. I also have relationships with the entertainment world. My brother is an actor. Officer Dan, I'm married with children for 7 years. He's also done some movies. And I am right now in the process of bringing people in to do some special events here. A young man I heard do Martin Luther King Jr. He's been doing them since he was 9 years old, and he's now 50-something. And he's coming this weekend to the Valley of the Flowers Church to do the I Have a Dream speech. He's also going to go over to, and that's at 10 o'clock. He's also going to go over to True Vine Ministries and do the same thing over there at around 11:30ish, 12 o'clock. But the point is, he wasn't going to come because he had other appointments this weekend. They got canceled, so he's made arrangements to come here. He's from Riverside. He's amazing. But can you imagine if those 4 weekends those 4 events had already been used in a quarter, and we wanted to take him to a winery to do something, or we wanted to bring in entertainment at a winery, and somebody was able to come, let's say an entertainer who entertained out at the Shoemash, and somebody's winery or event facility had been used already for their 4 times. The possibility of losing out on these types of things is absolutely unacceptable. To limit entertainment in a town like Lompoc, come on, really? Really? So please reconsider that. And as a previous Parks and Recs commissioner, that was one of our main things, was trying to bring more entertainment in. So please reconsider. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jack Rodenhigh, former planning commissioner. And I'd like to say that what we really want to do here is we don't want to abandon the public safety and health aspects of this. But on the other hand, we have other places in our society where public safety is critical. On the highways, public safety is critical, and yet we allow all kinds of dangerous situations to happen out there just in normal everyday traffic. So we allow cars that can drive faster than the speed limit. We allow cars that can pass each other on 2-lane roads. There are all kinds of instances of places where we encounter less than absolutely safe situations in our daily living. And I think that we can do the same thing here. We just have to call on the public safety people to come up with some more creative solutions. to simply cut down the size of the facility that's allowed to be used for wine tasting or public events, special events, is not the only way to do this. I understand that this might be a way that they're happy doing this. Structural changes are a lot easier to police than behavioral changes. So I can see why staff would like to do that. But on the other hand, though, there have got to be some alternatives to this that we can use where we can enjoy the environment that we live in, not put people at excessive risk, and go forward with this. And I hope that in the zoning ordinance that you finally approve, that those things are recognized. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor Osborne and members of the council. My name is Tony Tomasello. I'm with RRM Design Group. I'm the agent for the Santa Barbara County Housing Authority for the project at 1401 Cypress Avenue, the Cypress and 7th property, and they are also the owners and managers of the Cypress Court property. I'm here today to request that you postpone any action on resolutions and ordinances relating to those two properties. Due to the nature of the proposed changes as both map and text amendments, it's been quite difficult to keep tabs on exactly where this is landing. We really just received the most recent updates a few days ago, so we haven't had enough time to really analyze what this means for those properties. In addition, the Cypress Court property is currently proposed to be split. It is in two zones. It's not apparent whether or not that splits along a reasonable place on the property, whether that actually splits the commercial portion from the residential portion. So we still need to analyze exactly how that looks and where that line is drawn. And this could potentially create some undue hardship for the housing authority to continue to provide high quality, affordable housing opportunities on these sites which they own. So thank you for your time and your consideration.
Thank you.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of the council. My name is John Polanski. I'm Director of Housing Development at the Housing Authority of the County of Santa Barbara. And I'm just here to concur with what Tony had just said on our behalf. We request that you continue consideration of the proposed ordinance and resolution specific to Cypress Court. It is resolution number 6240, 19 in parentheses, ordinance number 1665-19 in parentheses. As Tony indicated, we really haven't had the ability to fully analyze the repercussions of the zoning change on the existing 60-unit senior development, the commercial shell that's been for sale for quite a while, and then our build-out of the site because the zoning is proposed to be downzoned to medium-density residential, which is inconsistent with the 15-unit proposal that was mentioned during the presentation that is already in and is set for Planning Commission consideration next week. So we do respectfully request a continuance of the resolution and ordinance specific to Cypress Court. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening once again, John Lynn, Lompoc resident. First, with regard to this 10 and 15% and 20% issue, I'm actually the one that requested that, and it had nothing to do with the wine industry. Over the years, I've worked with numerous businesses trying to locate in our industrial zones, and they had a combination of uses. They had office uses, they had showrooms, in some cases they had small retail spaces, And when they were trying to put all this, particularly in smaller buildings, into that 15%, invariably there were issues and compromises. And if there was an existing building that had an area greater than 15%, then that required a special permit for someone to occupy it. So my thinking was then, and I haven't changed my mind, that increasing it to 20% solved all those problems and made it easier for businesses to enter our buildings. I've also distributed to you some issues that I found, and I'm sorry, I apologize to the planning staff, but it's kind of hard to understand all these things when it's piecemeal. Some things that I found in the code when I got all those pages together on the weekend. Number one, I found that somewhere along the way we included safe parking as a permitted use with a minor use permit in the industrial zone. And given the odd hours at which the zone operates, parking is already an issue and we don't really need to change that. Also, I discovered, and my error again, I just read past it, that a floor area ratio has been included in the industrial zone and the business park zone. Now for the industrial zone, it's set at 0.5. In other words, 50% of the land can be used for a building. Just looking around town, a substantial percentage of the buildings in industrial properties exceed that now. And that will therefore put them into that famous pre-existing non-conforming use category, and that is not where you want to be. It's hard on property values, and it can cause you to have conditional use permits, and we know how time-consuming and expensive those are. The FAR for business park is 0.75. I don't think that's going to be an issue. At the request of the city staff, the fence height was lowered from 8 feet to 7 feet. There are no 7-foot chain link fences available to purchase, and the purpose of a fence is to keep people out, not to be lower so it's easier for emergency personnel to jump. I also noticed that we've acquired a striping permit in 17.3.08, so that if you have a parking lot and you're not going to do anything except put fresh paint down on it, and by the way, I have a striping machine that's available if anybody wants to borrow it, you're going to need to get a permit. And that's not necessarily the biggest part of it. The biggest part of it is you're going to pay an architect or an engineer to redraw that. So I'm out of time. There were a few more things on this. And also, I started looking at the zoning ordinance a little more critically. And here's a list of some things that I noticed. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Any additional public comments?
Hi guys, Randall Senna. I own Certain Sparks Music, located at the corner there of H and Ocean, and committed my life to helping build a music community here in Lompoc. And one of the unintended consequences of this change in the ordinance is limiting, and forgive me, I just got here, I had to run back to the shop, but if someone's already mentioned this, but limiting performance opportunities at the wineries, as I understand was one of the limitations, is the quantity of performances. This doesn't just affect adult musicians, but also young people in the community who use those opportunities to develop their talents. And in fact, our Flower Festival queen, Caitlin Chewy, was one of those students of mine who benefited greatly from getting opportunities like that, went to Pepperdine to continue her music education there. So there are unintended consequences that need to be considered with the zoning ordinance as well, and that would be my area that I'm very concerned with. So thank you. Consider that.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name's Al Johnson. I'm the building official. And I think we need to clear the air just a little bit. I'm going to give you the parameters, if you don't mind, of where a couple of these provisions came from. And that way everybody knows where this is coming from. But I would like to say that the 749 square feet or the 750 square feet has been completely misconstrued.
And I think it is very important that I read you the text so that everybody understands, and then it will hopefully make things.
So point of order is that we're in the middle of public comment. So you at this point are limited to 3 minutes of your explanation.
I understand that.
And I just wanted you to be aware, we're not going to be able to ask you questions, so you may be called back up
I understand
in order to have those. And I just want to check with our city attorney if there's any other concerns I should have.
No, you're exactly correct. I was actually going to ask Mike to turn on the clock for
Okay,
our
yes,
public
please
speaker.
turn on the clock because we're still in public comment, so even staff is limited to 3 minutes comment. Thank you.
Okay, so in reading what the intended occupancy is, so if you have a small building or a tenant space, the following rooms and spaces shall not, mandatory term, shall not be classified as an assembly occupancy. So what it says is that a room or a space that is used for assembly purposes with an occupant load of less than 50 persons and accessory to another occupancy shall be classified as a Group B occupancy or a part of that occupancy. And the second part is that it says a room or a space used for assembly purposes that is less than 750 square feet in area and accessory to another occupancy shall be classified as a Group B occupancy. So basically what that is saying is, and at no point has the city of Lompoc ever said that you can't do anything. What this section is saying is that if you're going to limit, or if you're going to have this space and you limit it to 750 square feet, then you don't have to do the separations. But at no time has the city of Lompoc ever said you can't do something. When you classify a building, you classify the use. If you're going to add to that use, it's an accessory. So the accessories are limited to 10%, and if you don't want to classify that as an assembly occupancy, then the parameter is that you keep it at less than 750 square feet. Nobody has ever said the limitation is it has to be 749 square feet. That is not what this code section says, and it's being completely misconstrued. So I wanted to clear the air right here.
Thank you. And please don't go anywhere because council may call you back for more clarification after public comment is closed.
Good afternoon or evening. My name's Kathy Joseph. I'm a business owner, winery owner, Fiddlehead Cellars in the Sabani Business Complex. I was here at the very beginning and I listened to the chamber report that was proud to share the increase in visitors, up 43%, and I'd like to think wineries are an important part of why that happened. I've been here operating my business at that location for 16 years, a lot longer than some of the others in the room, and I work every day to try and bring more people to my tasting room, to share the beauty of the area and to take advantage of what I wish Lompoc would offer and believe that in a growing opportunity could be a fabulous place. But I see other wine districts running circles around us, and I see reasons not to be present by restrictions that make no sense. I heard that the purpose of the rezoning was to create a user-friendly environment, to help modernize the situation, the zoning plan, and to encourage projects. And I would just like to encourage you to reconsider the impact of what is being proposed tonight. So thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
My name is Wesley Hill. I've lived here my entire life, and
I don't know a lot about it, all these zoning laws and stuff like that, given the fact that I just want to say it real fast, a firefighter's son. So I do understand the importance of it all. And growing up, I played sports my entire life. When I got into music, Brian Cole over there and Randall Sennett, if he's still in the room, those men gave me opportunities to find myself within just playing sports. If I didn't have music, and if I was only limited to going to 4 shows a year or events, I don't know if I would be standing here, if I would be the person I am today. So these types of things are very important. Now that I am 27 years old, as an adult, I started teaching at certain Sparks, and I found that a lot of the kids that I teach who are the same age, when I started playing shows when I was 14, 15 years old, which is fairly young, and it's insane to think about now. I see these kids and they don't know what to do, they don't know where to go, and I just think like, oh, if that was me and them now, I don't know what I would do. And to take that away from the community, I think would be a very bad thing. And again, like I said, I am a firefighter's son, so I do understand the importance of all these things, but I think it's just a good thing for the community, a good thing for the kids and everyone involved. And I do want to thank everyone for coming and supporting it. So thank you.
Thank you.
Name's Brandon Bridge, local business owner, resident, director of a nonprofit. I didn't know where to come up and speak to you on behalf of the local residents who play music, on behalf of a resident that cares about zoning. But as you can see, a couple members of our staff are running around trying to prove why they put this in. I mean, let's first acknowledge, this is building code. We're doing zoning. Should have never made it in here. That's a mistake number one. As Dirk so pleasantly started this meeting off with, it shouldn't have been done after the fact. That's ridiculous, and it's bad form. And what's really bad form is a building code inspector running in here last minute during public comment. It's absurd. All right, if we take a history lesson, we look at these industrial places, one of the first ever in the ghetto was actually a miniature golf and a batting cage. Okay, I don't know where that comes into a safety issue today. We also look at some of the other winery facilities. They were Comcast. Hundreds of people coming in and out of there, doing movie production, doing radio ads, doing TV ads, doing all kinds of lighting and special event type of equipment, far beyond what can ever show up in a little smoke thing or a light thing that might end up in a winery. So we have to recognize that these terminologies, these languages, this use, it's all very liquid, it's all dynamic, and it changes from day to day to day. And the hilarity of that is that we can have a theater. We can have a theater have a play about a wedding, but it can't have a wedding without being charged by our staff. So I would appreciate we just stop this nonsense, chasing stuff that's at California level rather than city level. Say, go back, meet with the business people, the people that were the stakeholders. Lisa Wise Consulting, who originally came up to saying, decrease CUPs, decrease MUPs, streamline the wine industry, cut out all these crit exemptions. You guys are crazy for this. And what did we end up? Less than we had yesterday. It's unfortunate that this is where we end up after 3+ years, a step back. So please, patiently, bring this back down. Ask the staff to go back and do the right thing and follow the direction of the stakeholders, the consultant we paid for, and what was ultimately decided about by the commission about 2 months ago. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak?
Norman Yost, Flying Goat Cellars. I've been in the Lompoc area for 10 years. I've had a winery and a tasting room in the wine ghetto, and I've watched it grow from about four wineries and 4 tasting rooms to over 20. And let's talk about jobs. How many jobs have been created while those wineries and tasting rooms come in? We talk about taxes. Let's talk about revenue opportunities. I just saw a budget of $3 million short in revenue for the city budget. Well, how else can we create jobs and revenue and taxes? Those are perfectly good opportunities. And with this, with these new ordinances coming into place, it's going to be more difficult for us to bring in tourists. And tourists put heads in beds, they put, people in restaurants, and they spend money here. And I know Steve Airwood talked about it. Paso Robles is doing a really good job, and we need to be able to keep up with these Paso Robles because they're going to pass us up. And if we can't keep people in this town, it's going to be very difficult. So anyway, thank you.
Thank you.
Not prepared, but inspired. It strikes me that there are a lot of people here with good intentions. That includes staff. Unfortunately, though, after listening to Mr. Johnson, it occurred to me that what is missing in our community is a vibrancy that we are no longer really encouraging if we put these kinds of rules into effect. And that is the difference I see when I visit other wine communities, other business parks and industrial complexes. And I think it would be unfortunate at this late date to change the direction that was recommended by the Planning Commission. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no one else rise, I'm about to close. Oh, see, I have to say you're about to close public comment.
Sorry, I just decided last minute as well. My name is Sylvia King. I'm a resident of Lompoc, have been for about 30 years. Again, I'm afraid we're little by little killing the geese that lay the golden eggs. Buellton is bending over backwards trying to get wineries and those type of businesses to come there to their new planned wine community. And here we're trying to add more and more regulations instead of making it easier and easier for our people to do business. You're all business people. Lompoc really needs whatever businesses we have left. I've been on the Military Affairs Committee for the Chamber. We've been trying to influence the base people to come to Lompoc, but we have less and less to entice them to come here too. Because of the cannabis industry now, they're not allowed to recommend Lompoc to some of their people because they can get in trouble, being around the cannabis. So the winery is really the main thing that we now have to offer for entertainment, and we should try to make it as easy as possible for them to have as many events as possible, especially since they're in an industrial zone and there are no immediate neighbors that can be disturbed. So please, let's not lose our wine industry as well.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to close public comment and we're going to bring it back to council. And I'm going to ask council how they would like to begin addressing our Planning Commission recommendations and zoning update. Councilmember Mosby.
One of the difficulties I had is the document that we were given here recently, and it was up for review for the last 30 days. First of all, let me say I attended all but I think one of the meetings of all those, and you guys, planning staff and stuff, you guys, heck of a job. I agree. It's a thick book. You got 500 pages of an old document, 500 pages of a new document you're trying to blend together. But I think something, and in some time we got a disconnect. And what we have is we've got a book that we just got 30 days, well, we got on Friday, handed to us. It was available for review before, but the complexity is that book we needed to go back and review back to a July book. So there's July book. But what we really needed to do was also review back to what is the existing code book. Because this, I believe this is the book we're operating under correctly right now.
It's the July 2018. So the only thing you really should have is red lines and then the July 2018.
This July book wasn't approved by council, was it?
No.
Okay, so I'm talking about this book right here that was approved in 14.
The existing code, are you referring
Yes.
to? That was started in 1974. They've been piecemealing ever since.
Right. What I'm getting at is when we look at the changes that we are supposed to, sorry, I pushed a button here. When we look at the changes, we're supposed to see what we're doing, because it's not really what the Planning Commission did since July till what they did in November. It's what we're going to change is this book that was from the 70s on. Now, in order to do that, you need to look at that book, and this book to see what changes are happening. And we just heard one section from the public here that was a small part, but there are a multitude of changes that are happening that if you don't go back, and a lot of them you can't even look at this because you have to just go back and read this book. One is the conditional use process. In this book, the conditional use process is more at the hands of the Planning Commission to make a decision moving forward. And if done right and with recommendations, as the CUP is, you can do many, many things. The way the CUP is written now, it's not in the most recent red line document. It's in July's document. It was written, so we're not even seeing the changes there. The CUP is written. You can only get a CUP if whatever it is you're going to do is in the book that says you can get a CUP for it. So if it's not in the book, it's very difficult to go get your conditional use permit. That's just one of them. But take storage containers. Now we know there's a lot of storage containers. We see those big old things all around town. And you could get a conditional use permit to get those before. And a lot of people did get those. Some people aren't operating with them. You could get a TUP, temporary use permit, and operate up to a year on them. If you're at a construction site, you could have them, but upon your condition of occupancy, you had to remove that. But the new book states that the only people who would be allowed to have containers are people in city parks. So nobody else would be allowed to have these containers. It would impact probably at least 300 people, 400 people around. But it'd be very difficult to connect those dots. There's several other examples I could give you that would work as well. But I think what really, really needs to happen so we can see what is really happening and we can line it up is that the red line document needs to go back to what we're truly changing. The red line document goes back to what the Planning Commission had in front of them and what they changed on the staff recommendations. It's not what current code is. And it's not easy because it's difficult for it to line up because there's a lot of changes that happen. A lot of very good changes have happened. But I really think if we're going to make decisions, we need to know what the heck we're doing. And it is not easy to go back and forth between, well, I kind of set the red line document a little bit beside, but to go back between this book and this book to really see what's happening. But there are significant changes that could change things drastically. One is the change on the 8th Street overlay. I don't know how many people have gone by the Blaze Pizza that blocks Habit, but there's a movement to move the commercial properties to the sidewalk. Now, we did get that setback so it's 10 foot from the sidewalk, but we want parking behind the buildings now. The majority of 8th Street's already built and the parking's in front. So if you make everybody go to the front who's going to do something new, you're going to be blocking the buildings in the back. And a simple example is the difficult movement when you go into Blaze Pizza and where Hamburger Habit is. They're blocked. The signs are blocked. But you try to drive out there, you're on top of the sidewalk before you're even going anywhere. there's also a minimum height requirement on H Street of 20 foot. So there's a lot of things that are difficult to catch. When there wasn't a minimum height requirement in the old book and parking wasn't designated, it just had to be on the same parcel that you're doing. Now, you could get a reciprocal parking agreement. It used to be 300 foot, but if you read this book, it's been changed to 400 foot. And there's just a lot of things that have happened that are significant, but they're very difficult to follow. I'd be willing if you guys want to go and chew it through, but my recommendation, not only with a portion that we've heard here that staff, that public went on, I don't know quite how many people we had, 15, 20 people were kind of wanting this to go back and chewed on by the Planning Commission, a portion that they're discussing here. But I would really like to see a book that is redlined compared to our current code and the changes that happen here and potentially in here. Otherwise, what we're doing, there's no way that I feel comfortable in approving what we're moving forward with. If you want to go line by line, we could get there. But it is very, very difficult, and I think we should have, again, a red line document that relates to this book and see if it's gone, if it's changed, if it's altered, and what we're doing. Because the only thing, again, reiterating again, the only thing we're seeing is the red line document that were the changes that the Planning Commission made to the staff document, not to our current code.
I believe our city attorney has a comment.
Thank you, Mayor. I understand what Councilmember Mosby is saying. I don't disagree with any of it, but I think the council needs to understand that if that request were approved, I wouldn't characterize what staff would create as a red line, because it's essentially the new code. It cannot be redlined against the old code because it's so different. It would be, the entire thing would be red almost. So I would characterize it more as a report. It would probably be an extremely lengthy report about what every single difference is between the old code and the new code. I think that staff might have some input on the budgetary impacts of creating that document, but those are my immediate responses to the comments from council member.
Could I add just a few words to that? What we really tried to do, and I apologize if it wasn't successful, was to, through that public participation process, whether it was a workshop, a joint workshop, an informal open house, is to really pinpoint those major changes. The codes are so drastically different, there's literally hundreds and hundreds. I can honestly say, and it's published in the staff report, that we don't have a budget to cover that type of document. Now, if we found a budget, that would be different. I do understand it is a big book and it is a large code, so that's why we're trying to zero in on the major changes and educate the public as well as decision makers through those informative boards, through those informative presentations, so on and so forth. Did we hit everything? We can't possibly hit anything or everything. And that's going to be similar to any person or any government entity that updates an entire zoning code. But we're certainly open to improving that process and improving how we show those changes. I just can say that from a budget standpoint, and I think Mr. Malavi touched on that, we don't have it in the budget at this time.
Councilmember Mosby, do you have any more questions before?
If I could respond to the statement, I agree with it not being a red line document. It's more like a lot more black document, right? But let me say, I went to all the meetings and there was never discussion of the modification of the CUP process. All but one that I went to, and I talked to, the planning commissioner was there, and it was not discussed. So that's a significant movement. There were a number of other things I referenced that weren't discussed at that. They were, smoothly gone over, especially towards the end in the last meetings. Things were happening fast and whole chapters were approved. So, and many a times I was the only person in the audience at those meetings. So that's why I'm stating at this point right now that, if you guys, I really do think we need to slow down it is big changes that we're making. You know, if we could take it at several chapters at a time as it's coming through, then as such, I think they would find some of the chapters would be relatively simpler to put together. But there are things that we're getting ready to do that are significant changes. Not only the one that you heard right here, the group got fired up right here, but there are more here. And I think if everybody who had a container right now in town, including a lot of our utilities have them, they would have to take them off their properties. The electric has a couple over here. You know, there's people up and down the streets. Are they prepared? What are they going to do if it's got sensitive equipment inside and all of a sudden it's got to go? So, I mean, there's a lot of stuff that's in here. I think we need to be a little more careful than, you know, grabbing it fast, quick, and easy.
Councilmember Vega.
I want everybody to know I hear you out there. The business community has spoken. I'd like to ask Mr. City Attorney, as far as the protocol between the commissions and the public and staff when we bring back something, when something was missed, if you could just go over that, because I think that would clarify whether it was a misstep. I'm sure everybody's heart is going in the right direction and that we're all trying to do good. So I commend staff and everything for all their hard work. But at the same time, the public spoke, and we were put here by the public. We're here to make sure Lompoc moves forward. In too many cases in the past, we've looked at short-term solutions where we want to take revenue from the people that are actually providing the jobs and providing opportunities here in Lompoc without looking at the long-term return, if they're sustainable and they stay in business and they stay here. We've had quite a run here lately, so it's quite a slap in the face, so to speak, when we have an industry here which I consider, if you look back, could be a missed opportunity if we don't take a hold of this. We've taken a long time, basically because we couldn't understand the concept of providing food and alcohol, and because everyone was kind of in the negative about using industrial buildings, where when you look around, you look in Buellton, you look in Santa Maria, and they're proactive, they're ahead of the game. So I think instead of being a follower, Lompoc needs to lead. I'd like us to realize that the saying, being a business-friendly city, I'd like us to come back with, during the budget process and during when we come back with our public hearing, and just find out if this is a concept, if it's just hype, if it's something that we can actually all get together as far as from you guys to the council that has to be moving forward by the city. It seems to me that we all want the same things, but I don't know that we have the structure to actually follow through with it. Any business incentives that we have for existing businesses or new businesses, it'd be nice to see what the list is and see what everything that we have to look forward to. So I would actually recommend that, aside with that the special event overlay zone and some of these other changes that have come up, which I was at the Planning Commission meeting when all these proposed changes were there, and the consultant, which we rely upon heavily, all said at that time that these changes can be done. So if they can be done, then we have to make sure that they're implemented with the code, working with city staff to make sure that it doesn't happen again, that we come back and we have the commissions that are mandated to making these changes. It's a quasi-judicial group that has the power of law behind it, and they're an extension of council. So I'd like to recommend that we bring all these back to this document back to the Planning Commission for another review and see what the missed items are, and maybe working with staff, we can make it even better. Again, I asked a question of the city attorney also about if there was a step missed in the process and how the committees and the commissions, or especially the Planning Commission, fit in with staff when there were recommendations and something was changed without going back to the Planning Commission.
Yes, thank you, Councilmember Vega, for giving me the opportunity to answer that question, to clarify the process that we went through on the zoning code update with the Planning Commission up to the council. The way that zoning ordinances are adopted and zoning amendments work is, as everyone knows, they are first considered by the Planning Commission. Planning Commission makes a recommendation to the City Council. And then we're here tonight discussing whether the council would like to adopt the Planning Commission's recommendation or whether the council would like to alter that recommendation, which the council is free to do. Also, it doesn't happen often, but sometimes when you get to the council level after the Planning Commission recommendation, city staff may disagree with the Planning Commission's recommendation. So city staff can also make a recommendation to the City Council. That happens to be what has happened tonight in the special event overlay regulations and the regulations on accessory uses. The staff report has presented to Council what the Planning Commission's recommendation was, and staff has presented what staff's recommendation is on those items. So, Council has the complete discretion to take whichever recommendation it wishes and adopt that one tonight, or to adopt a different rule that the Council would like to adopt on those issues. The last thing is whether certain changes need to go back to the Planning Commission by law. So there's a specific statute on that in the Government Code, Section 65857, that says any changes that are made at the council level that the Planning Commission did not previously consider have to first go back to the Planning Commission before the council can adopt those changes. Now, the way that's been interpreted is that if the Planning Commission has considered the rule, then it doesn't have to go back. So, for instance, we have a rule that was on the red line attached to the staff report tonight that says special events in the special event overlay zone cannot exceed the approved occupant load. Well, the Planning Commission did not recommend that rule, but I was present at the Planning Commission, and I recall certainly that it was discussed. So the Planning Commission has already considered whether to limit special events to the approved occupant load, and they decided not to do that. Staff is recommending that that be put in tonight, but it doesn't need to go back to the Planning Commission because the Planning Commission already considered whether to adopt that rule or not. Similarly, the maximum 4 events per building instead of per tenant, the Planning Commission did talk about what the event limit should be and decided on 4 events per tenant. So that does not need to go back to the Planning Commission before the council adopts a rule on that. And limiting the accessory uses in industrial zones to 10% of gross floor area, the Planning Commission recommended 20. So the council is free to change that without going back to Planning Commission because the commission already considered it. The one that I don't recall, and I might need help from staff, is if the council wanted to adopt this rule tonight that says there's an exemption for TUPs if the event is entirely inside a building and does not exceed 749 square feet or 10% of the gross floor area. I don't recall if the Planning Commission considered adopting a limit on or an exemption for TUPs based on floor area. If we needed to take that back to Planning Commission, that one precise rule, which the Planning Commission may not have considered, we can do that at the February Planning Commission meeting, and they will have considered it in time for the next council meeting.
Jeff, could we send the entire document back to Planning Commission?
Yes, sorry, I forgot to mention that too, that notwithstanding everything that I just said, you do have the authority to send it back anyway if you would like to.
For reconsideration, and I think I'd like to make that motion. I'd like to make that motion, the document be sent back to Planning Commission to let them take another look at it. We have some new players here, but we don't want to go back and change the document. We just want to let them take another look at it so that we can make sure that the recommendations of the public, and we still have the consultant here that's still on board, and I'd like that to happen first. I don't think that we're prepared tonight because of obviously the public's here and they have disagreements to many of these changes. I know that everyone's worked hard at this. It's not about one side or the other. It's about moving Lompoc forward and making sure the industry and the business community know that we're working on this. That's my motion.
Councilmember Cordova.
I want to take the time to thank our city staff, our commissioners, and of course the industry stakeholders that took the time to attend these meetings and try to come up with a resolution that would be favorable for all. I do have a couple of points that I'd like to share. I do believe that adopting and accepting ordinances has to include our consideration for economic impact and vitality for the future of Lompoc. We talk about balancing a budget, but that would need to, in that we would need to identify revenue sources as well. Simply cutting a budget is not enough, and no budget can be balanced or turned around without identifying revenue sources. And we know that by cutting back our wine industry or any kind of business industry businesses coming into our community, that's exactly what we would be doing, and we're failing to identify revenue sources. Business-friendly communities cannot be just economic development. It has to be a group effort from all departments within our city, notwithstanding, of course, the overall public safety aspect or impact, but working to develop resources or avenues where we can comply with reasonable safety while adapting to changes and opportunities for our community. So I am in favor of sending it back and being able to have a go at it again. I don't think that we need to go back to the beginning. I don't think that we need to scale it back that far. I think that as Councilmember Mosby said, just some time for us to slow down and make sure that we're making the right decision for Lompoc and what that economic impact will be for our community in the near future.
Councilmember Starbuck.
A couple of things before we just say, hey, Planning Commission, and throw it all back. There's a lot of validity in some of these recommendations here. Go to the front of the staff report and we look at it. Number 4 is a recusal for me. I will not speak of it. But the adoption of Resolution 6238, parentheses 19. This is one we should pass tonight. This has been brought up numerous times. It's ready to go ahead and move this one. We go over, we've been asked to continue some of the others by the Housing Authority, et cetera, et cetera. We would go to staff recommendation number 9, 1663, parentheses 19. Again, just some verbiage change. Zoning changes, nothing that needs to go back to the Planning Commission. It's already been through there and hashed out. Staff recommendation 10, 1664, parentheses 19. Again, rezoning a couple of parcels. We should go ahead and get these off the table and get them to move, because we're going to be doing the general plan review again in March, and this will just help clean up that review. So I'd like to make the motion that we accept staff recommendation on 5, 6, 9, and 10.
As a point of order, we already have a motion on the floor, which was Councilmember Vega's motion to send the zoning code back to the Planning Commission. So we need to see if there's a second on that first.
Which was guilty.
Or an amendment. If there is a second on that, I would ask for the motion to be maybe some more detail added to the motion about exactly what you would like the Planning Commission to reconsider. Because I don't know that it's workable that the Planning Commission, I currently don't know why the Planning Commission would need to reconsider the entire code if they've already recommended a code to the City Council. So we need some clarification about exactly what you want them to look at.
So to clarify from what I'm hearing between a motion that Councilmember Vega put on the table and I believe was seconded by Councilmember Cordova, is it was rather vague, sending the entire document back, and given the breadth and width of it, there is some concern about sending the entire document back and without clarity to the group, and then we have an additional motion that potentially exists to accept some of the things that have already been recommended by the Planning Commission that is very straightforward. And if I understand correctly from our city attorney, we could adopt sections of the ordinance as long as it didn't create loopholes or conflicts with other sections of the ordinance.
That's correct, and the resolutions that, or ordinances that Councilmember Starbuck mentioned are all rezones, so those should not create any loopholes or conflicts. I believe those could be introduced tonight. I would also note he did not include this one, but staff recommendation 11 is also only a rezone and could be adopted tonight if you'd like. I just wanted to note that.
Don't we also have general plan as well? So not a general plan change and a zone change? Because 5 is a general plan and so is 6.
So Councilmember Starbuck did not include 11 because it was one of the ones he mentioned that there was a request by the Housing Authority to not include.
My
So that was
apologies.
one of the reasons he didn't include that in his motion. So I think the first thing we need to clarify is that the first motion on the floor with a second is to send the entire document back without any clarification as to what the Planning Commission would do. And if that is a standing motion with no changes, we need to decide whether that motion carries forward before considering Councilmember Starbuck's. So I put it back to Councilmember Vega, who made the original motion. If you would like to make any changes, step back on your motion and consider Councilmember Starbuck's, or if you want to continue with your motion first.
If I restate my motion to include Councilman Starbuck's recommendations, I still would like to send the document back so we can have discussion. Yes, my focus here is on the special event overlay zone and anything to do with business-friendly type of environment. It's still vague. It's a large document. We don't expect to go back to square one, but just to give us a second opportunity to take a look at it with the Planning Commission now that it's been clarified that there were some changes that were made by staff that were never brought back to Planning Commission. Even they were legal and by law, and they were lawful, and we understand that, but I think everyone else here understands that, and I would expect them to come to a public hearing or come to a Planning Commission meeting when this is presented.
So you're adapting your motion to include, prior to sending it back to the Planning Commission, you will accept the addition of Councilmember Starbuck recommendation to accept and it's from the staff report, so if you're looking at the agenda, the numbers don't match, but from the staff report, 5, 6, and 9, the rezoning aspects,
10.
And 10. 5, 6,
Let's
9,
take a
and
look.
10.
You keep adding things, so let me go back and look.
I'm looking at my notes and I
Gosh.
forgot to mention one number. He is recommending that we accept the staff report numbered 5, 6, 9, and 10, which are all rezoning that need to occur anyway to update our general plan as well and move forward because those have been discussed and recommended and vetted by the Planning Commission with no changes. To avoid bringing 11 back simply because there is a group here that has a program they're looking to put on that particular area, and so we need to vet that better. And then send back to the Planning Commission your recommendation of those items that in particular look at the special event overlay, maybe the 8th Street overlay, things that impact what we quote unquote state as business friendly.
Yes, that's
Awesome.
correct.
Okay.
Yes, how about that? That was great.
Now I ask Councilmember Cordova if she accepts the adjusted motion and would like to second it, or she has any additional concerns.
I accept the adjusted motion.
Okay.
Could you repeat that motion?
Absolutely.
No,
If you would like me to,
God.
I can. I'm trying to make sure, because this is such a complicated move with so many moving parts, that our community is aware of what we're discussing and what those changes are, so that it is very clear to you. So,
Mayor,
City Attorney.
sorry. We ought to second on that motion. We can vote on that motion, but we need to vote on that motion in 2 parts.
Okay.
Because Councilmember Mosby has a conflict on number 5 and number 9.
Okay.
So we need to vote on Councilmember Vega's motion, but only for 6 and 10. And for this vote, Councilmember Mosby needs to
Abstain.
abstain, leave the room.
Okay. Recuse?
Oh, you're right. So let's vote on Councilmember Vega's motion with 6 and 10 first.
That's
and
what
then,
yes.
Right, yes.
Yeah, 6 and 10 first, which would allow Councilmember Mosby to participate. Okay, so the motion on the floor that we're voting for is the motion, but only including the rezone of item 6 and item 9 is up for consideration, which allows Councilmember Mosby to participate. Any discussion before we take the vote?
6 and 10.
I mean, sorry, 6 and 10, sorry. Trying to keep this all straight. 6 and 10. Thank you for the clarity. Any other questions, discussions? Let's vote. And that passes 5-0. And now we will ask Councilmember Mosby to step down. And now we will vote on approving section 5 and 9. Any question or discussion regarding that motion? Seeing none, let's vote. And that passes 4-0, with Councilmember Mosby recusing himself. So what we are sending back, according to this, is the document to the Planning Commission. Oh, Councilmember Mosby, please return. I don't know how quiet it is in that hallway and how much you can or can't hear. So, thank you for returning. So what we are sending back to the Planning Commission so that the community better understands is the rest of the document, especially the areas that have had recent changes and recommendations by staff, so that the Planning Commission can consider those. Please look at the next Planning Commission calendar, and for those of you that have those concerns, please continue to participate in those discussions and continue to reach out to us regarding that.
Mayor?
Yes.
We need to continue this public hearing to a date certain,
Okay.
because it is very, very expensive to notice a public hearing for this zoning code update.
Okay.
So we need to pick a date that's going to give us time to hold the Planning Commission hearing before we get back to council. So I might need help from staff on what date might be appropriate to continue this public hearing to.
I am leaning towards the meeting of April and not March. We certainly could prepare it for March, but it may be difficult because there's other things that staff are working on, but I will leave it up to the council if they want to go to the meeting in March, which is coming up very quickly. We also have a meeting on the 27th of February or April.
So given the requirements for an additional 30-day hearing once the Planning Commission makes those changes? Or is it not?
No.
Okay. So I'm hearing April. Does council have any concerns regarding bringing it back to the first meeting in April? Is that what we're looking at? Or second?
April 10th is the date for the Planning Commission meeting, correct?
Correct. It's the second Wednesday of the month, and that
You're
would be in
recommending the
April.
Planning Commission.
Planning Commission.
Oh,
Sorry.
no. I thought we were talking about the council meeting.
Oh, I'm sorry. We need to talk about both.
So
They
April-
want to bring
April
it back
10th.
to Planning Commission a date, and then when to bring it back to City Council? Or can we make that recommendation?
Right now, we need to decide what day we're going to have the next council meeting on the zoning code update. And you need to make sure that you have enough time to hold the Planning Commission meeting before then. And keep in mind, we don't need a public hearing to be noticed for the Planning Commission meeting. So we could hold it very soon, but it's up to staff to determine how much time is needed. But we don't need to notice the Planning Commission hearing.
So you were making, Mr. Halverson, you were making a recommendation that the Planning Commission meeting would be April 10th.
Correct.
To then impact when we as council might be able to put it on our calendar for notification, which would then be
Push it to probably May.
May 7th.
Yeah.
May 7th.
At the
And
earliest.
remember, I'm not trying to, stall. What I'm trying to do is we're going to need time to talk to the wine community, and we're going to need time to address some of the items that have been brought up, and it's something that can't be rushed. So that's why I'm suggesting that.
and I don't believe we're looking to rush you, which is why we wanted to make sure and understand the parameters from which we have to make a decision. Council, any discussion, concern? Councilmember Cordova?
I was just going to say, and in consideration that you have 2 new planning commissioners that would probably need a little bit of time to review some of this stuff and get up to speed.
So far I'm hearing May 7th for the continuation for council. Any concerns from staff about being able to deliver that to city council by then?
I think that we can do that.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Brian, that gives you 2 days to present a staff report to the city attorney's office for that schedule.
What is the actual date that the staff report is due for the May 7th, if you have that in front of you?
April 12th.
Okay. Okay, and then thank you for clarifying. Then how about the second meeting in May?
Is that okay?
Which was, what's
The 21st of May.
21st of May? Any additional questions, concerns before we go with that date? Okay, I think we have settled on a date. All right.
Mayor, I'd like to have a motion to continue it to that.
I will
Just-
move that we continue. My microphone's not on? It's on. Can you know? Oh, it's okay. You were turned on and you couldn't hear me. Got it. Okay. Whew. That green light's on. I was following the rules that the attorney reminded us. Okay, so the motion that I will make is that we are continuing the Planning Commission's recommendations to the May 21st council meeting. I need a second.
I'll second that.
We have a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll vote. That passes 5-0. Thank you all for sticking with us on that rather, I won't say convoluted, but convoluted conversation. So thank you for letting us go down that path. All right, so, all righty. Go ahead. Go ahead. I know. There is a point on the floor before I move on that item number 4, which is the adoption of number 623719 to remove the general plan text referring to the Old Town Specific Plan, attachment 2, could potentially be discussed and moved by us, but Councilmember Starbuck needs to recuse himself for that.
That's correct.
Okay, so before we dismiss this, I will make the motion that we should have this discussion and ask Councilmember Starbuck to step down if I can get a second.
I will recuse.
Thank you for your second, Councilmember Cordova, and thank you for recusing yourself, Councilmember Starbuck, because this is one of those things we can reduce the Planning Commission having to review. So the Old Town Specific Plan is being melded into the general plan. Is there any additional staff explanation you'd like to provide?
Into the zoning ordinance.
It's a zoning ordinance, sorry.
Mayor?
Yes.
You know, now that I think about this, I have a little bit of concern that we're removing references to the Old Town Specific Plan from the general plan, but then we're not adopting the zoning code yet.
Okay.
So I think we need to do those both at the same time.
Okay.
So that the rules stay in place and there's not a gap.
Okay.
So I actually would recommend that we keep this with the rest of the
Okay. So we will remove that motion from the floor, and we will ask Councilmember Starbuck to return. Oh, no. See, he was listening. He knew this might go quicker than expected. So again, thank you for your patience with us as we bend the rules and figure out which ones we can bend and which ones we can't. I appreciate that from the community and from council. It is a learning experience for all of us because you don't often get to do general plan and zoning massive updates like this. So we will move on to our agenda item of written communications.
Nothing more than you've already received.
Thank you. I'll open the floor for oral communications on any city matter, 2 minutes maximum. Seeing no one rise, I will close that. And now we'll start with council requests, comments, and meeting reports, and I'll start with Councilmember Vega.
I have one council request, and I mentioned it earlier as far as definition of business-friendly. if we could come back with staff during our budget hearings and our public hearings, to come back and see if we can have a meeting of the minds and see where we can actually integrate this into our city moving forward and selling the economic base and having the developers and everyone that would be an investor here in our community. I'd like us to have some sort of mission statement, something moving forward from which is integrated between council and staff. I think it needs defining, and we need to know whether it's just a pie in the sky, it's verbiage, or if it's actually a concept that we can adapt to and let everybody know that we want you here in Lompoc and we want to be successful. Anyway, that's my council request, that we have somebody come back.
Councilmember Starbuck.
I'll just mention that that's part of the general plan. That is when you open the cover. It's a vision statement, which ours is very, very old. I think that a good request, Councilmember Vega, would be if we looked at rewriting our vision statement. What is our vision? Because it's not been changed for,
Absolutely,
since the
sir.
zoning.
Absolutely. I would change my motion to say, yes, let's look at it and incorporate possibly a new vision statement so that we can all globally accept and move forward with that concept. I think economic development, I think explore Lompoc, I think all of us, we all need to be on the same page to make sure Lompoc's on the map.
I'll absolutely give you a second.
Thank you.
I'll third him.
Councilmember has given a third. Any more specific direction to city manager that you need regarding that aspect?
No, I think we're okay. I think it will come back as a general plan that was,
Okay.
if that's okay.
As part
to
of the
do it
general
all as
plan?
one of the part of the general plan review and update.
I think what I'm, if I could, Mayor,
Councilmember Vega?
is what I want to get into is something a little bit more solid, not just because someone calls and says, everyone, hey, they treated me great, and all of a sudden we say we're business friendly. Globally, we'd like it to be a concept. So the general plan is one thing, but the general plan is just a book that you read and we reference it to developers when they come in, and we use it as a tool either to stop growth or allow it to move forward, so it's actually restrictive to a point where it's only meant for code enforcement.
So,
Mayor, I just need to make sure that this time is being used only to request council items to come back and not the council making decisions. So,
yes, sir.
If you have a request for a discussion that you'd like to have at a later meeting, you can describe what discussion you'd like to have.
So just for clarity, Councilmember Vega, because the general plan discussion is due to come back to us relatively quickly, and because it's on that first page of the general plan, I believe the city manager was recommending that as part of that, he would bring back that vision, a potential updated vision statement as part of that meeting as a way to facilitate it happening sooner.
Okay, perfect.
Is that correct,
yes,
City Manager? Okay.
That'll work.
All right. Councilmember Cordova.
I don't have anything.
All right. Councilmember Mosby.
Yeah, I attended the SBCAG sub-regional meeting last Wednesday. I'd just like to make another comment in understanding, and the city attorney backed me up on that, and so did the planner, that the main planners, that the complexity of the document, and to do what I was kind of asking and connect the dots, and for what we have to do up here. I know we rely on what the Planning Commission does, but that it's potentially too expensive for for our budget and for our planning to do what really needs to be done with the important changes that we're making. So I'd just like to say there's a lot in this book, and it does not need to be taken lightly. And we do need to connect the dots, because there are some things that are happening in here that are game changers, big game changers. And I guess, Planning Commission is going to do it, and we'll get some more public comment. Many times what happens is after something happens and people realize that it happened, it wakes them up. And unfortunately, that's too bad that we had to see that. Fortunately, we had a group that came here today because the word got out on just one small part of this book. And I just think it's important that spend the time and to get this book. I know, Councilmember Cordova, you just recently got this book. And it's a lot, and there's 18 meetings that they had on it. So just take it seriously, and what we have, I'm sure there's going to be ongoing on this. That's it.
Councilmember Starbuck.
I have no reports.
Just as a reminder from the city manager's opening remarks that we do have the goal-setting workshop on March 9th here at City Hall, starting at coffee and refreshments at 8:30 and beginning at 9 a.m., and that the survey to help give us that feedback, if you aren't able to attend that meeting, is online, homepage of our website until February 22nd. So please utilize it. Secondly, that budget tool has gone live, and play around with it, take the survey, start to provide feedback. Again, we're trying to make sure the community has every opportunity, whether you can attend those actual meetings or not, to provide feedback, because while we love to have you here and have that actual feedback, we also know that there are a lot of you juggling a lot, and if we can open those avenues. I want to thank the American Association of University Women for holding the speech trek contest here at City Hall, and congratulate the Lompoc High School student Carla Panagua for winning it, and to all the community members who showed up and supported all the students that were competing, and some of the judges that are in the audience tonight for taking time out of your busy day to support our local youth and have the important conversation about how to reduce the violence in our local schools. So we're really looking to not only be business friendly, but improve the quality of life. And that's why this document, the zoning code, is so important. And many of us have been doing the homework long before we've ever gotten on council, and have a laundry list of things that we have been looking to make sure those changes and improvements. And why it is so drastic is, as staff mentioned, the last time this was majorly overhauled to meet not only all of the hodgepodge things we did with CUPs, but then all the new current mandates that have been issued at the state and the federal level that we have to incorporate into, has completely changed this document. So yes, it is a totally new and different document, and it is a lot of homework, but we are all committed to making sure that we are out the gate with the best document we can, knowing that it's also a live document. So we will make changes even after it's enacted as we begin to utilize that document. So none of these are dead documents. They don't go on a shelf. They are live, they are changeable, they are malleable, and that is all of our commitment, is to make sure those are appropriately dealt with. I would like to adjourn this meeting till the regular meeting of 6:30 p.m. March 5th, 2019. Thank you and good night.